Along the quiet shores of Minnesota's lakes, mist rises in thin, curling sheets. Cabins cling to the water's edge, their windows dark and empty. Some have been abandoned for decades, yet the sounds of life still echo within their walls. Locals whisper about shadows moving across cabins where no one lives. Cold whispers drift over the water at night, carrying voices that call names, warn, or sometimes plead. Doors creak open by themselves. Lights flicker inside rooms long unused. Footsteps echo across the decks when no one is there. Tonight, we visit the most haunted lakefront cabins in Minnesota, where the whispers never stop, and the cold air seems alive with the past. Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are warm tonight, because what lies ahead is not for the faint of heart. Minnesota's lakes are serene in the daylight, but at night, they hide secrets. Cabins along these shores carry more than memories. Some visitors have felt icy hands brush their shoulders. Some have seen figures standing in windows, watching silently. Some have heard whispers of names they do not recognize, calling them toward the lake. The cabins themselves seem to breathe with the chill, as though the walls remember every tragedy, every fear, every soul that once stayed within. Before we step closer, I have a question for you to think about. If you were alone in a cabin and heard a cold whisper calling your name from the woods or the water, would you investigate, or would you run for your life? Take a deep breath, my friend. Let us walk slowly along the haunted lakefront cabins of Minnesota. Wittawa's Lake Cabin rests alone on the northern shore, its wooden walls weathered and darkened by decades of exposure to wind and snow. The surrounding trees stand like silent sentinels, their bare branches scratching against the sky in winter storms, casting elongated shadows across the frozen lake. The air carries a crisp chill, sharp and biting, even on calm days, and the silence feels heavy, as though the forest itself holds its breath. Visitors who approach the cabin often describe a sense of being watched, though no one is near. The sound of footsteps seems to echo from inside, though the floorboards are empty. At night, a soft weeping drifts across the frozen expanse of the lake, carried by the wind in uneven bursts. The sound is faint yet persistent, a sorrowful melody that seems to rise from the cabin itself, unbound by time or reason. Windows are dark and clouded, yet some report glimpsing a figure standing within, a woman whose gaze remains fixed upon the icy waters. She does not move, except for subtle shifts, as if her attention is entirely consumed by the lake and whatever memories it holds. Even in daylight, her presence is described as lingering, fleeting, never fully seen, yet undeniably felt. Inside the cabin, icy drafts sweep across rooms with no open windows. Doors creak open and shut on their own, and the chill seems to settle in corners where the sun never reaches. Old furniture remains, covered in dust and frost, yet visitors swear they have seen faint movements, shadows that linger near chairs and tables before fading into nothing. Each creak of a floorboard or sigh of the wind amplifies the feeling that the space is not empty, that the cabin itself is inhabited by more than air and wood. The story of the widow is woven into the very fabric of the cabin. Long ago, she lived there alone, mourning a love lost to tragedy. Locals recount tales of her grief, a sorrow so profound it refused to leave with her passing. Some believe she still wanders the cabin, trapped between memory and the present, her mourning preserved in the cold corners, in the empty rooms, and in the frozen expanse of the lake she gazed upon endlessly. Shadows play across walls, stretching unnaturally with the movement of the sun, and reflections appear in windows and glass surfaces, catching shapes that vanish when approached. Visitors often describe a profound quiet, a tension that seems to thrum beneath the surface of every floorboard and beam, as though the cabin itself holds its breath along with its eternal occupant. The frozen lake reflects the sky and surrounding trees with crystalline precision, yet at night it seems to ripple with something unseen. Some claim the reflection of the widow can be seen on the ice, standing motionless as if watching for someone who will never return. Others hear faint whispers along the shoreline, carried by the wind, fragments of conversations never meant for living ears, traces of grief etched into the air. Exploring the interior, one notices details that hint at long-forgotten life. Books lie scattered on shelves, their pages yellowed, some marked by water and frost. Personal belongings remain, small objects that speak of routines and solitude, yet they take on a strange significance in the presence of the cabina's lingering sorrow. Every room seems to carry its own weight, a different layer of history, a different echo of the widow's mourning. Even the exterior holds unsettling signs of life. Branches sway despite the absence of wind. And lights seem to flicker within, reflecting off the icy windows in brief, erratic flashes. These occurrences leave visitors with the uneasy impression that the cabin is aware of their presence. And perhaps the widow herself is attentive to all who approach. Time feels distorted near Widow's Lake cabin. Moments can stretch or compress unpredictably. The wind and cold manipulating perception. Shadows seem longer at twilight. And sounds linger after they should have faded. The combination of natural elements, memory, and lingering presence creates an immersive experience. One that leaves no doubt that the cabin is more than a relic. It is a living archive of grief and longing. Visitors leave the cabin with an awareness that it is impossible to fully understand its atmosphere in a single visit. The sorrow of the widow resonates beyond the walls, carried on the wind across the frozen lake and through the skeletal trees. Even from a distance, the sense of being watched, of shared memory, remains palpable. The lake, the cabin, and the surrounding forest become intertwined, a singular space where grief persists and echoes endlessly. Widow's Lake cabin is a place where memory and presence meet. Where the past refuses to rest quietly. And where visitors encounter a history preserved not in documents or photos, but in atmosphere, shadows, and sound. It is a haunting yet beautiful reminder that some grief cannot be confined to time. That love and loss can linger in spaces long after their human occupants have passed. For those who enter the cabin, the experience is both chilling and captivating. Every whisper of wind, every flicker of shadow, and every soft creak of the floorboard reinforces the sense that Widow's Lake cabin exists in a liminal space. It is a domain of memory, sorrow, and presence, preserved in wood, ice, and air. To witness Widow's Lake cabin is to step into a world where history and emotion converge. The widow's mourning continues through the rooms. Across the frozen lake. And within the very structure itself. Her presence is subtle yet undeniable. A reminder that grief can linger far beyond life. Shaping the spaces it inhabits. Guiding all who enter into the hushed awareness of what was lost. And what endures. Black Pine Cabin stands alone among towering pines, its weathered wood blending into the shadows of the forest. Even in daylight, the clearing feels remote, the silence only broken by the occasional rustle of branches and the distant cry of a bird. The air carries a subtle chill, as if the trees themselves exhale cold whispers into the cabina's surroundings. Visitors to the cabin often describe the sensation of being watched. Soft footsteps pace the deck, yet when approached, there is nothing to be found. The sound fades into the forest, leaving only the sense that something unseen has been present. The deck creaks under invisible weight, and the floorboards seem to remember footsteps that no living person has left. The trees surrounding the cabin are more than a backdrop. They twist and sway in ways that feel unnatural. Their shadows stretching long across the ground. Cold whispers drift through the pines. Faint at first, then growing with urgency. Names are called. Words formed from voices that seem familiar yet belong to no one alive. Those who listen closely swear the forest itself carries memories. Voices of a time long past. At night, the atmosphere intensifies. Visitors have glimpsed shadowy figures moving between the pines, appearing and disappearing with seamless precision. They stand silently, observing from the darkness. Their forms shapeless yet distinctly human. The figures never approach directly. Yet the sensation of their gaze is unmistakable, pressing heavily against the mind of anyone near the cabin. Inside the cabin, the air is thick and carries a faint smell of smoke. The rooms are preserved as if frozen in time, remnants of a home interrupted. Furniture remains where it once stood, but the stillness feels unnatural, almost deliberate. Some guests report cold spots that appear suddenly, as if unseen hands pass through the room, brushing along walls and over surfaces. The cold is not merely temperature but a presence, lingering and patient. The origin of the cabina's haunting lies in a tragedy. Years ago, a fire consumed the home, claiming the lives of the original owners. Locals say the energy of that event never left, and the cabin remains cursed by the sorrow and suddenness of their passing. Each footprint, each creak, and every whisper is said to echo the last moments of those trapped within, replaying endlessly within the forest and walls. Even during the day, the forest feels charged with memory. Sunlight filtering through the pines casts intricate patterns across the deck and cabin walls, yet shadows linger where they should not. Travelers report feeling invisible hands brushing their shoulders, the faintest pressure that vanishes when they turn. The sensation is fleeting but unmistakable, leaving a chill that travels from spine to fingertips. Some visitors attempt to trace the origin of the whispers, stepping into the trees in pursuit of sound. The forest seems to respond, guiding them deeper among the pines. Only for the voices to shift and move beyond reach. The figures glimpsed between the trunks vanish when followed, leaving no trace other than an oppressive awareness that the cabin is never truly empty. The cabin's isolation contributes to its effect. The nearest road is a winding trail, often impassable during winter snows or spring rains. The surrounding pines act as natural barriers, shielding the cabin from sight and sound. Those who stay overnight report a profound sense of separation from the outside world. As if stepping across the threshold brings them into another reality. One where the past is present and the unseen observes continuously. The unseen observes continuously. Some have tried to ignore the phenomena, focusing on the natural beauty of the forest. Yet the atmosphere makes the ordinary seem strange. Doors creak without wind, floorboards groan under weight that cannot be traced. And the distant whispers weave through the air with rhythmic consistency. Every movement in the trees, every subtle shift of light and shadow, becomes an indication that the cabin is alive in ways that defy explanation. Even seasoned travelers with experience in remote locations find Black Pine Cabin unnerving. The layering of natural sounds with unexplainable phenomena creates a tension that builds steadily. The pines themselves seem to carry energy, responding to the presence of visitors, bending shadows and swaying branches in patterns that evoke the feeling of eyes watching from above. The forest and cabin together form a stage for unseen actors. Shadowy figures, whispers, and cold touches become part of an ongoing story, one that has persisted for decades. Each visitor contributes to that story simply by being present, their experiences added to the echoes already present in the wood, earth, and pines. Black Pine Cabin remains a place where the boundaries between past and present blur. It is a site where memory, tragedy, and unseen forces coexist, creating an atmosphere that is both haunting and compelling. Travelers leave with stories and impressions that cannot be fully explained, carrying with them the certainty that the cabin, the forest, and the shadows are all more alive than they appear. To step onto the deck or wander the forest around the cabin is to enter a world where silence is never truly silent, where the past lingers in every shadow, and where unseen presences mark the visitor with their subtle, chilling attention. Black Pine Cabin endures, a testament to memory, tragedy, and the lingering persistence of those who refuse to leave. The foggy shore cabin perches on a low bluff overlooking the dark waters of a quiet lake. Mist drifts across the surface, curling around the shoreline and clinging to the edges of the cabin. During the day, the scene is deceptively peaceful, the lake reflecting sunlight like a sheet of glass. But at night, the tranquility gives way to an unsettling stillness, broken only by the sound of wind and the occasional lapping of water against the shore. Visitors to the cabin often wake in the middle of the night to the subtle sound of doors opening and closing. The noises come from rooms where no one is present, and the heavy wooden panels swing with a rhythm that feels deliberate, almost purposeful. Some describe the sensation of a presence moving through the house, unseen but unmistakably there, brushing past them as they try to sleep. The lake itself seems to hold its own voice. Whispers drift across the water, soft and indistinct at first, carrying words that feel both like warnings and threats. The sound is impossible to locate, yet it lingers in the mind long after the initial hearing. Visitors report chills crawling down their spines as the murmurs seem to respond to their movements, growing louder when approached, fading when ignored. Shadowy shapes are frequently reported inside the cabin. In rooms without lights, forms slip silently across the floor, vanish into corners, or pass through walls as if they were made of smoke. These apparitions are fleeting, yet their presence is felt with an intensity that cannot be denied. Some guests have followed a shape from one room to another, only to find the space empty, leaving behind an inexplicable sense that the cabin itself is watching. The architecture of the cabin enhances the atmosphere. Narrow hallways bend unexpectedly. Doors creak with the slightest breeze, and old floorboards groan beneath imagined footsteps. Windows overlook the misty lake, framing scenes that appear both timeless and frozen, as if the water itself remembers events long past. Every creak, draft, and flicker of movement becomes amplified, creating a tense awareness that the cabin is more than a mere building. Locals speak cautiously of the cabin's history. They say it was abandoned after a series of drownings occurred in the lake nearby. Tragedies that left an imprint on the land. According to them, the spirits of those lost linger still, drawn to the bluff where life and death intertwine. Some warn that the mist itself carries the memories of those who disappeared, guiding the living toward the water or keeping them within the cabina's walls until dawn. The fog changes perception, obscuring details and elongating sounds. Footsteps echo strangely, reflections distort, and shadows take on forms that do not belong. Visitors describe a sensation of being watched from all directions at once, a presence that seems to drift with the mist and remain just beyond sight. The longer one stays, the more pronounced the feeling becomes, and the boundary between the living and the departed seems to blur. Inside, ordinary objects behave unpredictably. Chairs shift slightly, windows rattle without wind, and items are found moved from where they were left. Guests often sense a cold draft brush their arms, yet no door or window is open. Some have even felt the sensation of fingers grazing their skin, a fleeting touch that vanishes as quickly as it comes. Every sound, shadow, and subtle movement contributes to a growing sense that the cabin exists in a space that is only partly connected to reality. Visitors have told stories of waking to the sound of splashing, glancing out toward the lake, and seeing forms moving beneath the surface. Others recount seeing shadows pause at the edge of rooms, watching silently before dissolving into the darkness. Time seems to behave strangely, with nights stretching long and moments freezing in an eerie equilibrium. The cabin and its surroundings act as a liminal space, a threshold between the tangible world and something older, unseen, and unknowable. Even the approach to the cabin contributes to the atmosphere. The sound of boots crunching on gravel mixes with the whisper of water and wind, creating a sense of isolation before the structure is even reached. Those who venture here often speak of a sudden drop in temperature, the fog thickening to the point of disorientation, and a quiet that feels like the pause before a storm, although no storm is present. The foggy shore cabin is a place where memory, loss, and presence converge. The doors that move on their own, the whispers from the water, and the fleeting shadows all form a tapestry of experiences that are at once subtle and intense. Every visitor leaves with a sense of having touched something beyond understanding, a reminder that the cabin is more than abandoned, it is inhabited by echoes of the past, lingering in the mist and on the shore. Those who spend the night describe emerging at sunrise with a heightened awareness of the unseen. The fog may lift, the lake may calm, and the cabin may appear ordinary once more. Yet the feeling of being observed, the whispers in the water, and the memory of shadowy forms remain long after departure. It is a place where the lake keeps its secrets, and where the past continues to move silently among the present. Frostbite Cabin sits isolated near a narrow inlet, surrounded by frozen waters and winds that cut through the trees like shards of glass. The cabin is modest, built of weathered timber, its roof heavy with snow and ice. Even in the brightest daylight, the structure casts long, dark shadows across the icy ground, creating the impression that the cabin itself watches those who approach. Travelers speak of a pervasive cold that seems to follow anyone who steps onto the property, seeping through clothing, chilling the bones, and lingering long after they leave. Visitors often report seeing figures pacing the deck at night. Their forms are pale, indistinct, and impossible to fully discern. Yet the motion is deliberate, slow, and unnerving. Some describe the sensation of being watched, of eyes tracing them through the frost-covered windows. Even when the deck is empty, the figures appear briefly and then vanish, leaving only the sound of snow crunching under feet that no one can see. Faint laughter sometimes drifts across the water, soft and fleeting. It echoes off the frozen inlet and nearby cliffs, only to be replaced by sudden, complete silence. The effect is jarring, a momentary suspension of reality that makes the cold seem sharper and the night darker. Travelers often find themselves straining to hear what follows, yet nothing comes. And the stillness itself becomes a presence. The effect is jarring, a momentary suspension of reality that makes the cold seem sharper and the night darker. The effect is jarring, a momentary suspension of reality that makes the cold seem sharper and the night darker. The darkness seems to press in, making the cold seem sharper and the night even darker. The stillness itself becomes a presence. The effect is jarring, a momentary suspension of reality that makes the cold seem sharper and the night darker. The darkness seems to press in, making the cold seem sharper and the night even darker. Travelers often find themselves straining to hear what follows, yet nothing comes, and the stillness itself becomes a presence. The darkness seems to press in, making the cold seem sharper and the night even darker. The effect is jarring, a momentary suspension of reality that makes the cold seem sharper and the night darker. The stillness itself becomes a presence. Inside the cabin, whispers are said to call out the names of strangers who enter. The voices are faint, almost indistinguishable from the creaks of the floorboards or the rush of wind through cracks in the walls. Yet they are unmistakable to those who listen. The whispers do not follow predictable patterns. And some visitors swear they feel directly addressed, as if the cabin itself has taken notice of their presence. Objects may shift slightly. The hearth may stir with a draft that carries no warmth. And the air inside feels charged, almost alive. The original family who lived here vanished one particularly harsh winter. No records indicate what became of them, and no trace remains except for the cabin and its lingering aura. Locals claim that even after their disappearance, the family was never truly alone. Shadows move where no person stands, lights flicker inexplicably, and the echo of footsteps resonates through the empty rooms. The history of Frostbite Cabin suggests that its story is not only one of loss, but also of continued presence, a connection between past and present that refuses to fade. The surrounding landscape amplifies the feeling of isolation. Jagged cliffs rise around the inlet, reflecting moonlight off icy surfaces. while the water below is dark and still, freezing in the cold air. Even in daylight, the frozen inlet produces a subtle, eerie resonance. When the wind passes across the ice, creating sounds that mimic movement, whispers, or distant calls. Travelers describe feeling compelled to look over their shoulders constantly, sensing movement in the periphery of vision that cannot be accounted for. Steps on the deck, the soft thud of boots in snow, and the creak of timber all become heightened experiences in the silence that dominates the property. Some visitors report seeing fleeting reflections in frost-covered windows, figures that disappear the moment they are acknowledged. Others describe sensations of touch, a fleeting chill on the back of the neck, or the impression of hands brushing against their arms, subtle enough to make the skin prickle but not enough to be fully realized. The architecture of Frostbite Cabin contributes to its atmosphere. Low beams, tight corners, and narrow hallways enhance the sense of confinement, while windows frame views of the frozen inlet and shadowed woods beyond. The interplay of light and shadow within the cabin creates illusions of movement, making the familiar seem unfamiliar. Even furniture that remains in place can seem displaced in the mind's eye, as though the space remembers actions long past and replays them for visitors in fragmented glimpses. Time within the cabin feels distorted. Moments can stretch, with a visitor entering a room and feeling as though hours have passed when only minutes elapse. Conversely, entire periods of exploration can vanish from memory, leaving the sensation of a missing interval. The frozen air, the whispering voices, and the fleeting figures create an environment where perception is altered, and the boundary between reality and memory becomes tenuous. The boundary between reality and memory becomes tenuous. Even those who depart carry impressions that linger. The cold seems to follow them, faint shadows haunt their peripheral vision. And the memory of faint laughter or whispered names can resurface in ordinary life. Travelers speak of dreams in which the cabin reappears. The figures pacing, whispers calling. And the cold ever present. Frostbite Cabin leaves a lasting mark. A reminder that some spaces remain alive long after those who built them are gone. The cabin stands as a sentinel over the inlet, a place where isolation, memory, and presence converge. Shadows move, whispers call, laughter drifts across frozen waters, and figures pace the deck under the moon. Shadows move, whispers call, laughter drifts across frozen waters, and figures pace the deck under the moon. Shadows move, whispers call, laughter drifts across frozen waters, and figures pace the deck under the moon. Shadows move, whispers call, laughter drifts across frozen waters, and figures pace the deck under the moon. Frostbite Cabin is not merely an abandoned home, it is a repository of stories, a monument to those who vanished, and a space where the past continues to echo. Frostbite Cabin is not merely an abandoned home, it is a repository of stories, a monument to those who vanished, and a space where the past continues to echo. Frostbite Cabin is not merely an abandoned home, it is a repository of stories, a monument to those who vanished, and a space where the past continues to echo. Frostbite Cabin is not merely an abandoned home, it is a repository of stories, a monument to those who vanished, and a space where the past continues to echo. Visitors are drawn to its icy walls, compelled by curiosity, and reminded that some places refuse to be forgotten. The frozen inlet, the pale figures, the faint laughter, and the whispers create a tableau that is at once haunting, beautiful, and profoundly mysterious. Echo Lake Cabin rests at the far end of a narrow, winding lake, its wooden walls darkened by years of weather and time. The water stretches like a mirror, reflecting the surrounding pines and rocky shorelines. On still days, the lake is serene, almost hypnotic, yet a subtle tension seems to linger, as though the water itself is holding secrets just below the surface. Visitors often notice an eerie quiet, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant cry of a bird. But as evening approaches, a different sound emerges. Faint voices drift across the lake, echoing endlessly, impossible to locate. They carry through the trees and over the water, rising and falling with no apparent source. Travelers describe them as whispers that call out names, fragments of conversations, or soft, mournful tones that seem to come from nowhere. The cabin itself appears abandoned at first glance. Windows are clouded with age and frost. Doors creak on hinges that have not moved in decades. And the surrounding forest encroaches closely, its shadows stretching across the walls as the sun sets. Yet those who peer into the windows sometimes glimpse figures standing silently within, watching the lake. They are fleeting, vanishing the moment one approaches, leaving only the sensation of being observed. Inside, the air is cold and damp, carrying the smell of aged wood and earth. Floorboards groan beneath careful steps, and drafts sweep through rooms with no open windows. It is as if the cabin has become part of the lake, drawing the chill and the whispers into its walls. Some visitors report feeling icy hands brush against their arms, fleeting and chilling, as if the lake itself is reaching out to warn or guide them. The history of Echo Lake Cabin is as murky as the waters surrounding it. Locals speak of tragedies long past, of people who vanished on the lake or within the cabina's walls. Some suggest that those who linger too long are marked, the whispers following them even after they leave, embedding themselves in memory, a constant reminder that some places are never truly empty. At night, the lake becomes a shifting mirror, reflecting the moon and stars in distorted patterns. Shadows move across the surface, sometimes aligning with shapes glimpsed in the cabina's windows. The whispers grow louder, more urgent, as if the water is attempting to communicate, to draw attention to unseen events or lingering presences. The combination of natural reflection, shadow, and sound creates an atmosphere both beautiful and unsettling, captivating anyone who ventures too close. Visitors describe a sensation of time bending within the cabin. Moments stretch and compress, and sounds linger longer than they should. A single step may echo endlessly, footsteps repeated by the walls or reflected in the lake outside. This distortion amplifies the feeling that the cabin is alive with memory, a space where past and present coexist in subtle, uneasy harmony. Even the exterior of the cabin contributes to its haunting presence. Footprints in the snow or mud appear and vanish, often without explanation. Branches sway and creak despite still air, and light flickers through the windows in patterns that defy reason. Those who remain after sunset report an acute awareness of unseen eyes, a sense that the cabin and the lake are watching, and perhaps judging. Each step taken in the shadows. The echoes on the lake are not constant, yet when they emerge, they are impossible to ignore. Travelers speak of soft, sorrowful tones, laughter that turns to silence, or voices repeating a single word, name, or phrase endlessly. The sound seems to emanate from both the water and the cabin, converging in a way that defies logic, as though the landscape itself preserves the memory of those who have passed. Some who have spent a night at Echo Lake Cabin recount dreams indistinguishable from waking experience. Figures appear in the corners of rooms. Whispers thread through the imagination, and reflections on the water seem to mimic actions before they occur. Visitors emerge with a profound awareness of the cabina's presence, carrying the sense that some part of it, or of the lake, has entered their consciousness. The lake's surface is deceptively calm during the day, but by night, it becomes a liminal space, a threshold between what is seen and what is felt. Shadows stretch, voices echo, and shapes glide across the water as if moving independently of wind or current. Each ripple, each flicker of reflection, reinforces the impression that the lake remembers, that it holds traces of those who walked its shores long ago. Echo Lake Cabin is not merely a structure, it is a place where the boundary between the living and the remembered blurs. The whispers, the shadows, the reflections in windows, and the chill that sweeps through the rooms create an experience that is both immersive and unnerving. It is a reminder that some places retain energy, memory, and presence, long after human attention has moved elsewhere. For those who encounter the cabin and its lake, the experience lingers. Whispers seem to follow travelers into the forest, into cars, even into dreams. The feeling of unseen hands brushing past, of being watched, and of echoes repeating themselves in space and mind. Echo's lake cabin and the waters that surround it serve as a testament to the persistence of memory, grief, and presence, a place where the past refuses to remain silent. Stepping away from the cabin, visitors carry both awe and unease, aware that Echo Lake Cabin is a living archive of sorrow, reflection, and hidden stories. Its whispers, shadows, and icy touch serve as a reminder that some places are never truly empty, and that some echoes follow us far beyond their origin, haunting and preserving the memory of all who came before. Stepping away from the cabin, visitors carry both awe and unease, aware that Echo Lake Cabin is a living archive of sorrow, reflection, and hidden stories. Its whispers, shadows, and icy touch serve as a reminder that some places are never truly empty, and that some echoes follow us far beyond their origin, haunting and preserving the memory of all who came before. Stepping away from the cabin, visitors carry both awe and unease, aware that Echo Lake Cabin is a living archive of sorrow, reflection, and hidden stories. Its whispers, shadows, and icy touch serve as a reminder that some places are never truly empty, and that some echoes follow us far beyond their origin, haunting and preserving the memory of all who came before. Its whispers, shadows, and icy touch serve as a reminder that some places are never truly empty, and that some echoes follow us far beyond their origin, haunting and preserving the memory of all who came before. Stepping away from the cabin, visitors carry both awe and unease, aware that Echo Lake Cabin is a living archive of sorrow, reflection, and hidden stories. Its whispers, shadows, and icy touch serve as a reminder that some places are never truly empty, and that some echoes follow us far beyond their origin, haunting and preserving the memory of all who came before. Its whispers, shadows, and icy touch serve as a reminder that some places are never truly empty, and that some echoes follow us far beyond their origin, haunting and preserving the memory of all who came before. Its whispers, shadows, and icy touch serve as a reminder that some places are never truly empty, and that some echoes follow us far beyond their origin, haunting and preserving the memory of all who came before. Shimmering Lake Cabin rests quietly on the edge of the water. Its wooden frame blending with the surrounding trees. During the day, it appears serene, the lake reflecting the sky and forest in perfect stillness. Birds call in the distance, and the gentle lapping of water against the shore completes the picture of calm. As night falls, the atmosphere begins to shift. Travelers report lights flickering in the cabin windows. Reflections that do not correspond with any source inside. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the walls. And the surface of the lake shimmers with movements that seem to echo those within the cabin. The air carries a subtle tension, a sense that unseen eyes are observing every movement. Whispers drift across the water, faint at first, then growing in clarity. Names are spoken, familiar yet unidentifiable, as if the voices reach out to those who have entered. Some visitors feel compelled to listen, drawn by the cadence of the calls, only to find the source remains elusive, slipping into the night like a shadow on the water. The dock, once a place of quiet reflection, becomes a stage for unexplainable phenomena. Figures appear at the edge, dark and indistinct, standing motionless as though waiting. When approached, they dissolve into the darkness, leaving only the echo of presence behind. Footsteps splash along the shoreline, though no living being is seen. And the water itself seems to shift with unseen energy. Inside the cabin, the air feels heavier as darkness settles. Furniture appears undisturbed, yet subtle changes are noticed by observant visitors. Chairs may tilt slightly, curtains shift, and faint drafts pass through hallways with no origin. Curtains shift, and faint drafts pass through hallways with no origin. Faint drafts pass through hallways with no origin. The walls seem to carry sound differently, amplifying whispers from outside, and creating the impression that the cabin is listening as much as it is observed. The cabin is listening as much as it is observed. Creating the impression that the cabin is listening as much as it is observed. The lake mirrors this tension, reflecting not just the physical world but something more elusive. Shapes glide beneath the water's surface, forming silhouettes that vanish as the eyes try to focus. The moonlight glints off the ripples, creating illusions of movement, and the line between reality and reflection becomes difficult to discern. Travelers often report a sense of vertigo, as if the water itself holds memories waiting to be revealed. The origins of the haunting trace back decades. Those lost are said to linger, their spirits bound to the site, unable to move beyond the place where tragedy struck. Each ripple of the lake and flicker of light is a reminder of that event, a persistent echo that draws the living into the past. Even seasoned explorers describe an unease that grows with time spent on the property. The combination of silence and subtle movement creates an atmosphere where every sound is amplified. Every shadow holds significance, and every reflection could conceal something unseen. The natural beauty of the cabin and lake contrasts sharply with the tension that permeates the air after dusk. Visitors who remain overnight often describe moments where the boundary between the physical and the spiritual seems to waver. The dock may appear crowded with dark silhouettes, the whispers rise to a chorus, and reflections in the water become distorted, showing scenes that never occurred. There is an insistence in the environment, a feeling that the cabin and lake actively communicate with those who enter, shaping perception and heightening awareness. The environment also affects the senses in subtle ways. Cold spots pass along hallways, footsteps echo in empty rooms. Cold spots pass along hallways, footsteps echo in empty rooms, and the water carries the faint scent of smoke or salt. Cold spots pass along hallways, footsteps echo in empty rooms, and the water carries the faint scent of smoke or salt, linking to memories that are not Oni's own. The forest surrounding the cabin amplifies these experiences, rustling branches and shifting shadows creating an ever-present sense of movement. Even during calm nights, the lake reflects more than the sky. Ripples form patterns that seem intentional, guiding attention to points of interest along the shore or dock. Figures may appear briefly, their outlines faint, then vanish completely. The whispers continue, and some visitors swear they feel a light touch on the shoulder or hear soft breathing nearby. Reminders of a presence that is patient, persistent, and unseen. The combination of natural beauty, tragedy, and lingering spirits makes Shimmering Lake Cabin a place of fascination and caution. Each visitor leaves with impressions that linger long after they depart. An awareness that the lake, the cabin, and the shadows are all connected, forming a network of memory and presence that defies explanation. To walk along the dock or peer into the water is. The cabin holds the tension of those lost, the reflections of the living, and the persistent energy of the unseen. Travelers depart carrying the memory of voices, shadows and lights that shimmer in the dark. An experience that remains vivid and unsettling. Shimmering Lake Cabin endures as a site where history, tragedy, and the unknown converge. Its quiet waters and darkened windows invite curiosity and caution alike, offering a haunting, immersive experience that reminds all who visit that some places are never truly empty, and some echoes refuse to fade. Ravina's Nest Cabin sits deep within a dense forest, where the trees grow close together and their branches weave a natural roof over the narrow paths leading to the structure. By day, the cabin appears as a simple, rustic retreat, weathered by time and softened by moss and lichen. But as twilight falls, the atmosphere shifts, and the forest seems to close in, carrying with it a quiet tension that cannot be easily shaken. Visitors often hear the cries of ravens long before they see them. The calls are unnaturally close, as if the birds are perched just beyond the windows or circling overhead in deliberate patterns. The sound is sharp, echoing between the trees and bouncing off the walls of the cabin. Some have reported that the cries mimic words or phrases, faint but intelligible, leaving an unsettling sense that the forest itself is watching and listening. At night, black silhouettes sometimes move across the windows. They appear briefly, vanishing when approached, leaving only the memory of motion and the shadow of something unseen. The shapes are rarely defined, yet they evoke a familiarity, as if the figures belong to a family that once lived here. Guests have reported a feeling of being observed from multiple directions at once, as though the cabin itself is aware of every movement, every sound. Whispers drift across the water near the cabin, carried by the wind. The voices are soft and distorted, sometimes repeating secrets or personal details that should be unknown to any living observer. The source of the whispers is impossible to locate, and they fade when one tries to confront them directly. Those who hear them often describe a chill, a sense of unease, and the impression that the voices are not merely echoes but intentional messages from an unseen presence. The history of Ravena's Nest Cabin is as mysterious as its phenomena. Locals say the family who lived here vanished without a trace, leaving behind all of their belongings, including meals left on tables. Books open to mid-pages. And personal items scattered as if time stopped abruptly. The story persists in hushed conversations, with warnings to travelers not to linger after dark. Many believe that the familiar's spirits remain, bound to the cabin by unfinished business or by the mysterious circumstances of their disappearance. The cabin's architecture amplifies the unsettling atmosphere. Narrow hallways and low ceilings create a feeling of enclosure, while the uneven floors and creaking wooden beams heighten awareness of every step. Windows reflect the surrounding forest in distorted forms. And the mist outside often makes the edges of the cabin appear to move. Each shadow, each subtle creak, becomes magnified, producing a heightened sense of perception and alertness. Inside, ordinary objects behave in strange ways. Chairs may shift slightly, doors close on their own. And personal items appear displaced after a brief absence. Guests frequently report the sensation of being brushed by unseen hands. A fleeting touch that vanishes before it can be confirmed. The combination of sound, movement, and the cabina's natural isolation cultivates an immersive experience. One that lingers long after leaving. The surrounding forest seems alive with more than just wildlife. Paths become confusing in the mist, and the trees bend light and shadow into patterns that play tricks on the eyes. Some visitors have described glimpses of figures moving just beyond the tree line, halting when noticed and then dissolving into the fog. The ravens are ever present, their eyes glinting in the dim light and their calls echoing in the stillness, reinforcing the feeling that the cabin and the forest are part of a larger, unseen network of observation. Time behaves strangely at Raven's Nest Cabin. Even a short night can feel elongated, with minutes stretching into hours and moments repeating in a subtle, disorienting loop. Guests often awaken with a sense of having moved or spoken in their sleep, unsure if it was real or imagined. The mist and shadows, combined with the whispers and unexplained movements, create a liminal space where perception becomes unreliable and the boundaries between the living and the unseen blur. Approaching the cabin contributes to the sense of unease. The path narrows, the forest thickens, and the mist grows heavier. Every footstep sounds amplified, echoing in ways that suggest more than one presence. The rustle of branches, the distant cries of birds, and the whisper of wind over water all combine to create an environment in which isolation feels absolute and the unknown feels near. Those who reach the cabin often pause, sensing that the world outside has shifted and that the cabin exists in a space slightly removed from normal time and reality. Ravena's Nest Cabin is a place where stories and specters converge. Every moving shadow, every whisper over the water, and every cry of the ravens contributes to an atmosphere thick with history and mystery. The spirits of the vanished family, the echoes of the forest, and the shifting mists all create a space that feels alive in ways that cannot be fully explained. Guests leave with a lingering sense of having encountered something beyond comprehension, a place where the forest watches, the cabin remembers, and the unseen continues to move silently among the living. Even after leaving, memories of the cabin remain vivid. The cries of the ravens, the movement of shadows across windows, and the whispered words carried by the wind echo in the mind. The forest, the water, and the cabin together form a presence that endures, a reminder that some places hold their histories and their inhabitants long after they should have vanished. Ravena's Nest Cabin is one such place, where the line between the past and the present, the living and the unseen, is blurred, and where the echoes of those who came before continue to roam freely. Cold Hollow Cabin rests in a deep, shadowed hollow by the edge of a frozen lake. The surrounding trees are thick and gnarled, their branches tangled overhead, allowing only thin streaks of pale light to filter down. Even in daylight, the hollow feels enclosed, a natural amphitheater where sounds echo unnaturally and shadows seem to linger longer than they should. Travelers speak of a pervasive chill that seeps into every corner, a cold that moves independently of the wind or the seasons. Inside the cabin, icy drafts find their way into rooms with no open doors or broken windows. The air shifts unexpectedly, brushing against skin and clothing, leaving a sense of unease that grows with every step. Some visitors describe the sensation as almost sentient, as if the cold itself is aware of their presence, testing boundaries and watching their movements. This sensation grows with every step, making the experience even more unsettling, as if the cold is probing their very souls. Figures are often glimpsed in corners, their forms barely discernible yet unmistakably present. Some appear hunched or still, while others pace slowly, moving with deliberate intent. Eyes sometimes glow faintly, pale points of light in the dim interior, watching, waiting. They vanish when approached, leaving only the lingering impression that the cabin holds more than empty space. Whispers echo through the hollow, rising and falling like the wind across the lake. Some call out warnings, others plead silently, voices carrying an emotional weight that feels intimately personal. The words are rarely clear, yet the tone is unmistakable, a mixture of caution and sorrow that reverberates through the walls and along the frozen ground outside. Travelers often find themselves listening longer than intended, drawn by the insistence of the sound. The cabin's structure amplifies its eerie presence. Low beams, narrow hallways, and uneven floors make each step feel significant. Every creak a potential signal of unseen movement, every creak a potential signal of unseen movement. Frost gathers along window panes and in corners, forming patterns that resemble shapes or symbols to the observer's eye. Even furniture seems to take on a life of its own, casting shadows that shift with changing light and perspective. Visitors report that the cold does not remain passive. The cold presses against skin, biting and persistent, and sometimes seems to gather in areas where movement is detected. Many describe a feeling of being watched or followed, even in rooms that appear empty. The lake outside adds to the cabina's isolation. Its surface is dark and mirror-like, reflecting the skeletal trees and the sky above, yet concealing its own depths. On quiet nights, the water seems to carry sound from the cabin outward. Or perhaps bring echoes back in, creating a looping resonance that can be heard in the subtle hiss of the wind or the soft lap of frozen waves. Travelers sometimes mistake natural sounds for footsteps, distant voices, or whispers emerging from the ice itself. The history of Cold Hollow Cabin is shrouded in mystery. It was built long ago as a seasonal retreat, yet records of those who stayed are scarce. Some claim that families who once lived here vanished over winter months, leaving the cabin abandoned but not empty. Locals speak of the hollow as a space where the past lingers, and where visitors may encounter remnants of those who never left, lingering in shadow and cold, tied to the land and structure in ways that defy understanding. Explorers often notice patterns in their experiences. Figures appear in predictable spots, whispers respond to movement. And the cold seems to intensify when attention is drawn to it. Mirrors or polished surfaces reflect shadows that are not entirely Oni's own, creating disorienting reflections that challenge perception. Even brief stays leave impressions that persist long after departure. The memory of temperature, sound, and sight etched into consciousness. Time within the cabin feels different. Minutes can stretch unnaturally, while hours may vanish from memory. The hollow becomes a liminal space, where the ordinary rules of reality are suspended, and the line between past and present is blurred. Travelers often leave with a lingering sense that the cabin has observed them, recording their presence in ways they cannot fully comprehend. Despite the unease it inspires, Cold Hollow Cabin draws visitors. Its isolation, the whispers, the figures, and the living cold create a hauntingly beautiful tableau. The hollow itself feels alive, a natural amphitheater that shapes and responds to those who enter. Shadows, cold, and whispers are constant companions for anyone willing to step inside. Even a brief encounter leaves an indelible mark. Cold Hollow Cabin endures in the shadowed hollow, its presence unbroken by time or season. Figures pace unseen, whispers echo, and the cold presses against those who approach. The cabin is more than wood and stone, it is a space where the past and present converge, where the living brush against echoes of those long gone, and where the hollow itself watches, waits, and whispers. Travelers leave with the memory of a place both beautiful and unsettling, where every step, sound, and draft carries meaning. Cold Hollow Cabin remains, a sentinel of shadow and frost. A reminder that some spaces hold more than history, more than memory. And that the unseen is always closer than we imagine. Misty Pine Cabin rests deep among towering pines, their trunks shrouded in perpetual fog. The dense mist swirls and shifts, making the cabin appear and disappear, as if it has no fixed place. Its wooden walls are darkened with age, moss clinging to shingles, and the deck creaks under the weight of time. Visitors often notice an unsettling stillness when approaching. The wind moves through the trees, yet the cabin remains eerily silent, untouched by its passage. But as night falls, strange sounds emerge. Footsteps pace the deck, heavy and deliberate, though no one is visible. Doors slam without cause, echoing through the mist, startling those who thought they were alone. Shadowy figures move between the trees, glimpsed only from the corner of the eye. The forest seems alive, watching, waiting, as if aware of every step and every breath taken near the cabin. Visitors report a sense of being observed, an intangible pressure that grows heavier the longer they linger. Inside, the cabin is cold and musty, filled with the scent of aged wood and damp pine. Mirrors are particularly unsettling. Some visitors glimpse faces in them that do not belong to anyone present. Reflections twist and distort, showing fleeting images of people who seem to stare back. Their presence is fleeting yet undeniable. The history of Misty Pine Cabin is steeped in tragedy. Locals speak of a family who vanished during a winter storm decades ago. No trace was ever found, and the cabin was abandoned, left to the encroaching forest and relentless fog. It is said that the spirits of that family linger, bound to the place by the storm that claimed them. At night, the fog thickens, swallowing shapes and muffling sounds. Shadows stretch along the cabin walls, and footsteps echo endlessly in the stillness. Some visitors claim to hear whispers in the pines. Faint voices calling names or speaking in hushed tones that cannot be understood. The combination of mist, shadows, and sound creates an atmosphere that is at once mesmerizing and disquieting. Travelers describe a sensation of time shifting within the cabin. Minutes stretch and compress. A single creak of the floorboard may repeat itself, echoing across rooms and hallways. The cabin seems to respond to presence, to awareness, as if it is attuned to those who enter and unwilling to let them leave unchanged. The exterior of Misty Pine Cabin contributes to its haunting presence. Fog drifts across the deck and the forest floor, creating moving shapes that play tricks on the mind. Windows glimmer with reflections that vanish upon closer inspection. Branches sway with no wind, casting long shadows that twist unnaturally. Each sound, each movement, reinforces the impression that the cabin is not empty, that it is alive with memory and intent. Visitors often recount a feeling of being touched by unseen hands. A brush against the shoulder, a light tug on clothing, or a chill that passes without explanation. These sensations leave a lasting impression, a reminder that the cabin and the surrounding forest are imbued with forces beyond comprehension. The mist, the shadows, and the unseen presence converge to create an experience that lingers long after leaving. Footsteps on the deck, slamming doors, and whispers in the fog are not constant, yet when they occur, they dominate the senses. Visitors report the feeling of being drawn into the cabina's rhythm, the house itself dictating perception and attention. Some who have spent nights in the cabin recount dreams that feel indistinguishable from waking life. Figures appear, moving silently through hallways. Whispers thread through thought and imagination. The fog outside mirrors the uncertainty inside, creating a sense that boundaries between reality and perception have dissolved. Travelers emerge changed, aware that the cabin leaves a mark, subtle yet persistent, in mind and memory. The surrounding forest adds to the unease. Pines sway and groan with no discernible wind. And the mist conceals movements both natural and unnatural. Shapes move between trunks and undergrowth, fleeting yet unmistakable. The fog makes distances deceptive. A path may seem short and safe, only to stretch endlessly, with shadows trailing every step. Misty Pine Cabin is more than an abandoned structure. It is a space where history, memory, and presence converge. The lingering fog, the shifting shadows, the chilling sounds, and the reflections in the mirrors create an environment where the past feels alive. The spirits of the vanished family are said to walk these halls, their sorrow and unrest woven into the very walls and air. Those who leave the cabin carry the experience with them. Whispers may haunt dreams. Shadows may linger at the edges of vision. The sensation of unseen hands brushing past may follow them into everyday life. Misty Pine Cabin, shrouded in fog and memory, is a testament to the power of place, a reminder that some locations are never truly empty and that echoes of the past can persist indefinitely. For anyone who approaches, the cabin offers both allure and caution. The mist, the pines, and the shadows form a landscape of mystery and subtle menace. Time spent there leaves an impression, one that lingers in memory like the fog that drifts endlessly through the forest. The presence of Misty Pine Cabin is not only in its walls, its mirrors, or its deck, but in the sensation of being watched, of history breathing quietly through the pines, and of the past refusing to remain silent. Moonlit Lake Cabin rests quietly along the edge of a still, darkened lake. During the day, the cabin appears peaceful, surrounded by dense forest and the gentle rippling of water along the shore. Sunlight dances across the surface, reflecting the trees and sky, giving the place an inviting serenity that belies what comes with nightfall. As the moon rises, the atmosphere shifts. Shadows stretch across the walls, lengthening and twisting in ways that seem unnatural. Visitors often sense a presence before they see anything, a subtle pressure in the air that signals the cabin is not empty. Whispers drift across the water, faint at first, barely audible above the gentle lapping of the lake. The voices call names, familiar yet impossible to place, as if reaching through time from another existence. Those who pause to listen feel a tug on their attention, a pull toward the shoreline where the moonlight meets the water, yet no one is ever visible. The whispers seem to shift with the wind, always just beyond reach, leaving a lingering unease. Windows along the cabin reflect more than the interior. Some visitors glimpse figures standing silently, observing the lake with unblinking eyes. Their forms are vague, dark outlines that dissolve when approached, leaving only the impression of being watched. The silence surrounding them amplifies every small sound of the rustle of leaves, a distant splash, the crack of a branch, and makes the environment feel alive with unseen movement. Inside the cabin, the temperature often drops sharply without explanation. Icy drafts pass through hallways, doors, and open rooms, brushing against shoulders and arms. The sensation is fleeting yet unmistakable, a reminder that the cabin is inhabited by more than just memories. The cabin itself retains traces. Furniture shows subtle signs of movement. Items shift slightly between visits. Doors open or close with no wind. Floors creak in patterns that mimic human steps. Shadows in corners seem to cling to the walls, receding only when noticed directly. A rhythm to these occurrences. A pulse that suggests the space itself holds an echo of past lives. Outside, the lake mirrors these strange happenings. The surface glimmers under moonlight, but reflections sometimes appear distorted, showing shapes that do not exist in reality. Ripples form without wind, moving outward in perfect circles, as though something beneath the water seeks attention. Some visitors describe seeing fleeting glimpses of figures walking along the opposite shore, vanishing before they can focus, reinforcing the sense that the cabin and lake are intertwined with the unseen. Local accounts tie the cabina's haunting to its former inhabitants. Stories speak of those who lived and died along the lake, their lives marked by tragedy and loss. It is said their spirits never left, bound by memories and unfinished business, lingering on the shore and within the cabin itself. Each visitor becomes part of this ongoing presence, feeling the subtle weight of eyes upon them, the soft murmur of voices carried across the water, and the fleeting contact of unseen hands. Time seems to bend within the cabin at night. Moments stretch and contract, and the natural sounds of the forest and lake take on unusual patterns. Footsteps echo where no one walks, whispers rise in counterpoint to the wind, and the shadows flicker in ways that challenge perception. The environment becomes immersive, demanding attention and fostering a sense of heightened awareness. Every glance toward a window or the water feels charged with anticipation, as if the lake and cabin are waiting to reveal something just out of reach. Some visitors report feeling compelled to step closer to the lake, drawn by whispers and reflections that promise understanding but deliver only fleeting glimpses. The dock may appear crowded with dark forms, standing still and observing. When approached, these figures vanish, leaving only the ripple of water and the echo of distant voices. It is a subtle yet profound reminder that the cabina's occupants are not limited to the living, and that the boundary between past and present remains porous. Despite its eerie presence, Moonlit Lake Cabin holds a strange allure. The natural beauty of the forest and lake, combined with the ethereal phenomena, creates an atmosphere both haunting and mesmerizing. Travelers leave with memories of shadows, whispers, and cold touches that linger long after they have departed. The cabina's presence endures, a space where the living and the spectral coexist, and where the lake carries the stories of all who have ever called the shore home. The cabin remains as it always has, silent during the day, yet awakening under the moon. Every night brings new encounters, each subtle and mysterious, yet unmistakably real. Visitors are reminded that the spirits of past inhabitants roam endlessly, tied to the lake and cabin, ensuring that Moonlit Lake Cabin remains a place where the line between the living and the spectral never fully fades. Silver Mist Cabin sits on the edge of a quiet lake, perpetually shrouded in a dense, rolling mist that rises from the water like a living veil. The fog clings to the trees and drifts over the cabina's weathered roof, softening edges and blurring the line between land and lake. By day, the cabin appears tranquil, isolated, a place for reflection and escape. But as twilight falls, the atmosphere shifts, and the mist seems to thicken, moving with a will of its own, wrapping the cabin in a shroud of uncertainty. Travelers who venture here often hear whispers carried on the fog. The voices are soft and fragmented, sometimes warning, sometimes pleading. They come from every direction and nowhere at once, fading as quickly as they appear, leaving only the sensation that someone, or something, is close. Leaving only the sensation that someone, or something, is close. Visitors describe a chill that follows the words, brushing along the skin and settling deep in the bones, a subtle reminder that the cabin is never truly empty. Shadowy figures are often seen pacing the deck or standing in the windows. Their forms are dark, undefined, yet unmistakably humanoid. Guests speak of the unease these figures evoke, a sense of being watched by entities that linger just out of reach, observing quietly, waiting. The mist amplifies every motion, every flicker of shadow, making the ordinary movements of the wind and water seem deliberate and alive. Some visitors have claimed to see fleeting reflections of people long dead in the lake. Faces appear in the rippling water, distorted yet recognizable, sometimes smiling, sometimes silent. No physical presence can be found when one searches, yet the impression lingers. The combination of shadow, fog, and reflection creates an environment where perception is unreliable. And the line between reality and the unseen becomes fluid. The cabina's history adds weight to its eerie reputation. It was abandoned after the mysterious disappearance of its owners. A couple who had once lived quietly in harmony with the lake and the surrounding woods. No one knows exactly what happened. And no trace was left behind. Local legends speak of the spirits of the owners still wandering the property, bound to the cabin and the mist, repeating patterns of life that cannot end, whispering messages to those who dare to listen. Inside, the cabin feels alive in subtle ways. Doors may shift slightly on their hinges, chairs may appear moved, and objects seem displaced without explanation. The sounds are faint yet deliberate, as if the cabin itself remembers its past and the lives that once inhabited it. The mist outside acts as a barrier, isolating the space and amplifying the presence of the unseen, making ordinary sounds carry unnaturally. The surrounding forest adds to the sense of isolation and uncertainty. Trees stand close together, their branches interwoven, filtering the light and casting long, shifting shadows. The fog snakes between the trunks, forming shapes that resemble figures, and sometimes leads visitors to misstep or lose orientation. Even the wind seems purposeful, carrying voices, rustling leaves, and swirling the mist in patterns that hint at intent. Those who walk near the water often find themselves drawn to certain points by instincts they cannot explain, as if the landscape itself guides them. Time behaves strangely at Silver Mist Cabin. Moments stretch and contract, creating a sense of dislocation. A short walk can feel prolonged, a brief glance outside can seem eternal. Guests have reported waking from light dozes to find hours have passed. Or noticing shadows and shapes that shift subtly with every visit to a window. The mist acts as a veil over perception, and within its presence, the ordinary rules of space and time seem suspended. The cabin and its environment create a deeply immersive experience. Every whisper, every movement, and every shadow contributes to an atmosphere thick with tension and mystery. Visitors leave with memories that feel almost tangible, a lingering sensation that the mist has imprinted itself upon their senses. The reflection of past lives, the movement of shadows, and the persistent fog combine to create a place where the past and present coexist. Where the living and unseen brush against one another in subtle, unforgettable ways. Even after leaving Silver Mist Cabin, the impression remains. The whispers, the shadowy figures, and the fleeting reflections in the water echo in memory, persistent and haunting. Travelers speak of the mist as if it carries intent, of the cabin as if it watches and remembers. The story of the missing owners, the whispers in the fog, and the movement of the shadows create a sense of presence that endures. Silver Mist Cabin is a place where mystery lives, where the past clings to the present, and where the unseen continues to move silently among those who dare to enter. Frost Lake Cabin sits on the edge of a frozen inlet, surrounded by snow-covered trees and icy waters that stretch into the distance. The winter light is pale and muted, casting long shadows across the snow, making the landscape feel still, yet oddly aware. Even from afar, the cabin seems to exude a presence, a quiet energy that draws the eye and unsettles the mind. Travelers often notice that the air around it is colder, sharper, as if the wind itself carries the memory of something unseen. Inside the cabin, cold drafts move unpredictably, flowing through closed doors and cracked walls. Some visitors describe the drafts as purposeful, as though the air is testing them, following them from room to room. The chill is more than physical, it penetrates the senses, creating a heightened awareness of every sound, every shadow, every subtle movement. Figures are sometimes glimpsed at the windows, their silhouettes dark against the snow outside. Appearing still, yet seem to watch with intent, vanishing when approached. A presence that does not leave, lingering at the edge of perception. Even in the brightest daylight, the cabin's windows sometimes appear occupied by forms that dissolve the moment one looks directly at them. Whispers carry across the frozen lake, faint at first, then more distinct. Names are spoken, calls of warning or pleas, drifting on the wind in ways that defy explanation. They seem to follow intruders, wrapping around the ice and snow, seeping into the cabin through cracks and gaps. Some claim that the voices are responses to movement, rising in urgency when someone lingers too long or steps too close to the windows. The effect is both haunting and mesmerizing, a soundscape that blends the natural with the supernatural. The architecture of Frost Lake Cabin amplifies its unsettling atmosphere. Low beams, narrow halls, and small rooms create a sense of confinement. While windows frame the frozen inlet and surrounding woods in ways that distort perspective. Shadows appear to stretch and shift, making familiar corners seem unfamiliar. Even the furniture seems charged with a subtle energy, casting shapes and silhouettes that do not align with the light. Casting shapes and silhouettes that do not align with the light. Even the furniture seems charged with a subtle energy, casting shapes and silhouettes that do not align with the light. The frozen lake outside adds to the isolation. Its surface is mirror-like, reflecting trees, sky, and cabin in distorted fragments. The ice itself seems to carry memory, resonating with sounds and movements. Travelers report the sensation of being followed across the ice, hearing distant movements that vanish when investigated. As if the lake itself participates in the haunting. Time inside the cabin feels distorted. Minutes can stretch unnaturally, while hours sometimes vanish from memory. The cold, the whispers, and the fleeting figures create a liminal space where reality seems suspended. Every movement is significant, every sound amplified, and every glance can reveal something just beyond sight. Visitors often leave with the sense that the cabin has observed them, cataloging their presence, recording their fear and curiosity alike. History hints at the cabina's eerie reputation. Built decades ago as a seasonal retreat, it has seen periods of abandonment and intermittent occupation. Locals tell stories of travelers who never returned, or who emerged changed, carrying tales of cold drafts that followed them home, whispers that haunted dreams, and shadows that lingered long after departure. Visitors often experience patterns in the haunting. Figures at windows appear at certain times. Whispers rise in response to movement. And drafts intensify where attention is focused. Reflections in frost-covered panes sometimes reveal images not present in reality. Fleeting glimpses of past visitors or unknown entities. The cabin interacts with those inside, responding subtly to presence. Creating a dialogue of perception and sensation that is difficult to escape. The winter landscape magnifies the effect. Snow dampens sound, making footsteps seem closer or more distant than they are. Shadows lengthen unnaturally, blending trees, ice, and cabin into a singular, immersive scene. Travelers moving along the frozen inlet report sensing figures behind them. Hearing whispers in the wind. Feeling sudden changes in temperature. The environment itself becomes a part of the haunting, a partner in the stories that unfold. Even brief visits leave a lasting impression. Travelers speak of dreams where the cabin reappears, the figures at the windows watching silently. Whispers echoing across frozen waters. The cold follows them, persistent and inescapable. And the memory of the sounds and sights remains vivid. Frost Lake Cabin is not merely a building. It is a repository of presence. A space where past and present collide. And where the boundary between the living and unseen is thin and permeable. The cabin endures, a sentinel on the frozen inlet. Figures pace unseen, whispers drift across the ice. And the cold presses against every visitor. The windows catch fleeting silhouettes. And the lake reflects the shadowed woods with uncanny clarity. Frost Lake Cabin is more than wood and stone. It is a living testament to memory, presence, and the unseen. Travelers who enter step into a world that is both beautiful and haunting. Where the spirits of the past watch, whisper, and wait. Those who leave carry the imprint of the hollow cold, the whispered names, and the spectral forms glimpsed through frost-covered glass. The whispered names. And the spectral forms glimpsed through frost-covered glass. Frost Lake Cabin remains, an enduring presence on the frozen inlet. A reminder that some places are never truly empty. And that the unseen is always closer than we think. Shadow Creek Cabin rests along a narrow creek that feeds into the lake. Its wooden walls darkened by time and moisture. The water runs quietly most of the day, yet as dusk falls, a different rhythm emerges. Splashes echo along the banks, though no one is outside to disturb the surface. The creek seems alive, carrying secrets beneath its calm facade. Visitors often remark on the feeling of being watched. Shadows move across the deck, pacing slowly as if keeping time with some unseen presence. They vanish when approached, melting into the dense woods that surround the cabin. The trees sway with no wind, casting long, shifting shapes that play tricks on the mind. The combination of water, shadow, and isolation creates an atmosphere thick with tension. Inside, the cabin is quiet but not empty. Whispers echo from walls and corners, sometimes repeating thoughts that linger in the mind. A visitor might think of a memory, a question, or a fear, only to hear it carried back from the darkened rooms. The effect is subtle, unsettling, and deeply personal. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine, heightening the sense of being in a place suspended between reality and something else. The history of Shadow Creek Cabin is marked by tragedy. Years ago, a drowning occurred in the creek, taking a life before it could be saved. Locals say the event left a mark, binding sorrow and unrest to the cabin and the water that flows beside it. Some believe the spirits of those lost linger, drawn to the creek and the cabin that overlooks it. Their presence is suggested in the sounds of water splashing and in the fleeting glimpses of figures disappearing into the trees. At night, the creek seems to gain a voice of its own. Ripples form without cause. And shadows stretch across the cabin walls. Footsteps pace the deck in time with the movement of water. A cadence both deliberate and unnerving. Even seasoned travelers feel the pull of the cabin. As if the structure itself guides perception, shaping what is seen and heard. Every creak of the floorboards. Every drip of water. Every flicker of shadow. Contributes to the feeling that the cabin is alive with memory. Visitors report mirrors reflecting more than their own image. Faces appear in the glass, blurred and fleeting, disappearing when looked at directly. Some see forms pacing behind them, their shapes indistinct yet unmistakable. The effect is disorienting, blending reality with perception, creating a space where the natural and supernatural intertwine. The sound of flowing water is constant, yet unpredictable. Splashes appear without origin, ripples move in circles, and shadows fall across the banks, leading visitors into the woods, or back to the cabin, as if it directs their journey with unseen intent. The surrounding forest amplifies the sense of isolation. Trees crowd the cabin on all sides, their branches thick and twisting. Fog rises from the creek in the early morning, curling around the cabin and obscuring vision. Shadows lengthen and bend in ways that defy natural light. Shapes appear and vanish at the edge of perception. Travelers often feel that the woods themselves are conscious, part of the same presence that haunts the cabin. Shadow Creek Cabin also affects the perception of time. Hours may pass unnoticed, and the rhythm of the creek seems to stretch or compress moments. Footsteps echo multiple times. Whispers linger long after they are spoken, and shadows appear to repeat movements. The experience leaves an impression, subtle yet profound, of being caught in a loop, where the past and present overlap, and the creek carries echoes of both. Some visitors describe sensations of touch, cold or pressure, as if the spirits of the drowned seek to communicate or warn. The creek and cabin together create an environment where the senses are heightened, where every sound and movement is amplified by expectation and unease. Even the most rational minds are affected, sensing patterns and presences that cannot be explained. Shadow Creek Cabin stands as a testament to memory, tragedy, and the unseen. Its deck, its walls, and the creek that runs beside it hold the weight of events long past. Shadows, whispers, and the strange movements of water combine to create a haunting that is persistent yet elusive. Those who visit often leave with a sense that the cabin is more than wood and stone, that it exists as a vessel for history, emotion, and lingering presence. For those who approach, the cabin offers both fascination and caution. Every splash in the creek, every shadow on the deck, every whisper carried on the wind serves as a reminder of what occurred here. The tragic drowning, the lingering spirits, and the restless energy of the place create an experience that stays with travelers long after they leave. Shadow Creek Cabin is not merely abandoned, it is alive with echoes, a space where the past refuses to remain silent. The creek, the deck, the cabin, and the surrounding forest work together to shape an environment that is atmospheric and immersive. Time spent here leaves a lasting impression, one that blends memory, perception, and the haunting presence of the past. Visitors emerge changed, carrying the sounds, shadows, and whispers of Shadow Creek Cabin with them. The weight of tragedy can bind a location, water, and structure together in a way that transcends explanation. Blackwater Cabin rests on the edge of a dark, still bay, its weathered wood blending almost seamlessly with the shadows of surrounding trees. By day, the cabin appears calm, the surface of the water smooth and mirror-like, reflecting the sky and nearby foliage. Yet even in daylight, there is an unsettling weight in the air, a subtle tension that warns visitors something is not quite right. As night falls, the atmosphere grows heavier. The surface of the bay seems to shift, and travelers report seeing figures moving just beneath the water. Shapes that glide with unnatural grace. The forms are fleeting, appearing only for a moment before vanishing into the black depths. The water reflects moonlight in strange ways, creating ripples that have no visible source. As if the lake itself is alive with memory. Whispers rise from the water after dark, faint and soft at first, then growing into voices. Sometimes familiar, sometimes unknown. The sound is hypnotic, echoing across the cabin and along the shoreline. Those who pause to listen often feel a subtle pull, a suggestion that the water is reaching for them, drawing their attention to the unseen depths. Some visitors glimpse shadowy silhouettes moving just inside, figures that vanish when approached, leaving only a chill and a sense of having been watched. Inside the cabin, temperatures drop inexplicably. Cold drafts sweep through hallways and rooms, brushing against shoulders and arms with a light, chilling touch. Doors creak open or shut without wind. And the subtle echo of footsteps follows intruders along the wooden floors. The feeling is never threatening, yet it is persistent. A constant reminder that the space is shared with unseen occupants. The lake itself seems to carry memories of tragedy. Locals say the spirits of those who disappeared while boating nearby remain, tethered to the water and the cabin. Their presence is subtle, manifesting in ripples that appear without wind, shadows that move beneath the surface, and whispers that linger long after the initial sound fades. Some nights, the water glows faintly under the moonlight, a spectral shimmer that hints at what lies beneath. Travelers have reported glimpsing figures standing along the shore, staring silently toward the cabin. They do not move in the ordinary sense, instead, they seem suspended between the world of the living and the realm of memory. When approached, the figures dissolve into mist or shadow, leaving the observer with the echo of presence and the sense of a story unfinished. The cabin and bay work together to create an immersive experience. Sounds are amplified, yet disjointed. The soft lapping of water against the dock sometimes resembles footsteps or the dragging of something unseen. The wind carries fragments of voices and laughter that vanish as soon as attention is focused on them. Even the moonlight seems to bend, casting reflections that do not align with reality, forming shapes along the shore and water that vanish when approached. Visitors report moments of disorientation, losing track of time within the cabin or along the water's edge. The combination of whispers, shadows, and spectral reflections creates an environment that feels alive with memory. Despite its unsettling presence, Blackwater Cabin holds a strange allure. The natural beauty of the bay, the stillness of the water, and the isolation of the cabin draw travelers in, creating a tension between fascination and caution. Visitors leave with lasting impressions of shadows beneath the water, voices carried across the lake, and the faint brush of icy hands. The experience lingers. A quiet but persistent reminder that the spirits remain, watching, waiting, and bound to the cabin and the bay. Blackwater Cabin stands as a place where the line between the living and the spectral blurs. Each visitor becomes a witness to the stories carried by the lake, the whispers of those who vanished, and the presence of shadows that never fully fade. The cabin endures, quiet and watchful, a sentinel on the dark waters, ensuring that the spirits of the bay remain part of the night, ever present and impossible to forget. Whispering Pines Cabin sits deep within a dense forest of towering pine trees, their needles forming a thick canopy that absorbs light and casts the cabin in near-perpetual shadow. The air is heavy with the scent of resin and earth, and the wind threads its way through the trees, carrying sounds that seem almost human. It is a place where the ordinary becomes strange, where the forest itself feels alive, listening and observing. Visitors often hear whispers carried on the wind. The voices are soft, indistinct, yet unmistakable, drifting through the trees and curling around the cabin. They are not constant, but appear in fleeting moments, slipping in and out of perception. Sometimes the whispers are urgent, sometimes they seem like a quiet call, as if the forest itself is trying to communicate, or perhaps warn. The effect is subtle but persistent, pressing on the mind and stirring a sense of unease. Figures are occasionally seen at the windows, dark silhouettes that appear without warning. They linger for a moment, sometimes gesturing silently toward the lake that stretches beyond the trees, then vanish without a trace. Guests have described the feeling of being watched, the sense that these forms are aware of every movement, every step, yet always remain just out of reach. Their presence is unnerving, a reminder that the cabin is not entirely empty, and that unseen eyes may follow long after the visitor has arrived. The cold is another presence at Whispering Pines. It moves independently of the weather, pressing against the skin and settling into clothing. Guests speak of chills that seem to follow them from room to room, brushing along the neck and shoulders, or lingering in corners of the cabin long after the wind has died down. The sensation is more than a simple drop in temperature, it carries a weight, a quiet pressure that amplifies the sense of being watched and observed. Locals tell stories of the family who once lived here, a household that vanished without explanation. The furniture remains, untouched, as if waiting for the family to return. Visitors often find chairs still positioned around the table, beds neatly made, and personal items left in place. The preservation of the home adds to the cabin's unease, creating a feeling that the past has not moved on, that the house and the surrounding forest hold memories too potent to fade. Walking through the cabin, every creak of the floor and shift of the wind is heightened. Doors may open slowly on their own, or close with a soft thud, while shadows in the corners seem to lengthen and shift with imperceptible intention. Even small details, like a rocking chair moving slightly or a window rattling in the breeze, take on significance, as if the cabin is subtly reminding visitors that they are not alone. Outside, the forest presses close. The trees sway, and in their movement, some see fleeting shapes or figures slipping between the trunks. Travelers report moments when the forest seems to guide their movements, subtly nudging them along paths they did not intend to take. The combination of shadow, wind, and whispering creates an atmosphere of suspense, where the boundary between natural and supernatural becomes indistinct. Time inside Whispering Pines cabin also seems altered. Moments can stretch, leaving visitors unsure how long they have been inside. A brief pause at a window can feel like an eternity. And the forest beyond can appear to shift while no one is looking. The cabin and the forest together create an immersive experience, where ordinary measures of time and space are unreliable, and the senses are heightened to every subtle movement and sound. Guests often leave with memories that linger vividly, the whispers of the forest, the shadows at the windows, and the sensation of cold pressing against the skin. Some speak of dreams where the cabin and trees are present, the forest guiding them or watching, while the unseen figures move at the edge of perception. Whispering Pines cabin is a place where the living encounter echoes of the past, where the boundary between what is real and what is remembered feels thin and permeable. Even after departing, the cabin continues to haunt those who have stayed within its walls. The sound of distant whispers, the vision of fleeting figures, and the memory of cold brushing against the skin remain, lingering like the mist that often rises among the pines. Whispering Pines cabin is more than a building. It is a convergence of memory, presence, and mystery. A place where the unseen and the living coexist. And where every visitor carries away a piece of the forest's enduring, enigmatic presence. Craggy Shore cabin perches precariously on a jagged stretch of coastline, where waves crash relentlessly against dark, slick rocks. The cabin creaks and groans with each swell, a reminder of the sea's constant presence and its power over the land. Travelers approaching the shore often feel the cold mist carried by the wind, sharp and biting, stinging the skin and carrying the scent of brine and old timber. At night, the moon casts pale light over the rocks, and figures sometimes appear silhouetted against the silver glow. They stand perfectly still, watching the cabin or the water beyond. Their shapes shifting when the eye moves or when the waves reflect light in unexpected ways. Travelers report a sense of being observed, a pressure on the senses that never fully dissipates. As though unseen eyes follow every step. Whispers echo across the stones, carried by wind and surf. Names are called, softly at first, then louder, insistent, urgent. Some voices warn visitors to leave, while others seem to plead, desperate and sorrowful. The sounds wrap around the rocks in the cabin, entering through gaps in walls, under doors, and even into tents or vehicles nearby. The effect is disorienting, a constant reminder that the shore is alive with memories of the past. Inside the cabin, the air feels heavy with history. Floors groan underfoot, walls seem to absorb sound, and furniture casts shifting shadows in the flickering lamplight. Travelers often report fleeting touches, a sensation like invisible hands brushing against arms or shoulders, leaving a shiver in their wake. No source is ever seen, yet the feeling is unmistakable, an intimacy that is both alarming and compelling. The rocks surrounding the cabin tell their own story. Weathered and jagged, they are littered with the remnants of the Sea S. Violencia. Broken oars, splintered planks, fragments of boats. Each object seems to hold a memory, a fragment of tragedy or survival. Silently witnessed by the waves. The soundscape is immersive and unrelenting. Waves crash, spray hisses against stone, and wind whistles through gaps in the cabina's walls. Amid this natural symphony, whispers emerge, soft yet clear, carrying emotion impossible to ignore. Names of the missing, cries for help, and warnings to turn back resonate in ways that challenge perception, making visitors question the line between memory, imagination, and reality. Travelers describe patterns in their encounters. Figures appear in the same locations on certain nights, shadows move against the grain of lamplight, and whispers rise in response to hesitation or curiosity. Figures appear in the same locations on certain nights, shadows move against the grain of lamplight, and whispers rise in response to hesitation or curiosity. Shadows move against the grain of lamplight, and whispers rise in response to hesitation or curiosity. Whispers rise in response to hesitation or curiosity. Even the creaking of the cabin seems deliberate, as though timed to heighten awareness or provoke unease. Even the creaking of the cabin seems deliberate, as though timed to heighten awareness or provoke unease. It is a space where time feels different, where the ordinary rules of observation and sound bend under the weight of unseen presence. Where the ordinary rules of observation and sound bend under the weight of unseen presence. Under the weight of unseen presence. The ordinary rules of observation and sound bend under the weight of unseen presence. The sea itself is a participant in the haunting. The tide shifts, carrying with it echoes of shipwrecks and lost lives. Storms bring a heightened energy, waves striking harder, wind howling through every crevice. During these nights, visitors often report the cabin trembling, doors rattling, and the sensation of movement across the rocks outside. Figures at the shoreline seem more defined, whispers sharper, and the pressure on the skin more intense. History has left its mark on Craggy Shore Cabin. It was built as a refuge for those working near the water, a place to rest between voyages and survive harsh weather. Over time, tragedy has imbued the cabin and its surroundings with lingering energy. Shipwrecked travelers, fishermen lost to storms, and others who perished along the coast are said to remain tied to the shore, their presence woven into the rhythm of wind, wave, and stone. Their presence echoes through the landscape, a haunting reminder of the unforgiving power of the sea. Visitors often leave the cabin with lasting impressions. Even after the first steps away, the echo of whispers and the memory of cold hands brushing against skin remain vivid. Figures glimpsed on rocks replay in the mind's eye, and the sound of waves against the jagged shore continues to carry urgency and sorrow. The experience lingers, reminder that the past is never truly gone, and that some places are repositories for memory, presence, and emotion. Craggy Shore Cabin endures as both refuge and warning. Its creaking walls, the ever-present cold, and the watchful figures on the rocks create a tableau of isolation and memory. Whispers drift across the stones, calling names and recounting old tragedies. While the sea remains constant, a guardian of secrets that cannot be forgotten. Travelers who approach step into a space where the living intersect with echoes of the lost. And where the natural and supernatural are inseparable. The cabin, the rocks, and the relentless waves together form an experience that is unforgettable. Figures stand silhouetted against moonlight, whispers carry across the shore. And invisible hands remind visitors of the unseen presence that inhabits the space. Craggy Shore Cabin is more than a building. It is a vessel of memory. A witness to human endeavor and tragedy. And a place where the past and present coexist in an unbroken rhythm. Visitors depart changed, carrying the sensation of cold, the echoes of names spoken on the wind, and the impression of figures watching from the rocks. Craggy Shore Cabin remains, a sentinel on the jagged coast, preserving stories of shipwreck, loss, and lingering spirits. The shore is alive with memory, and anyone who dares to enter cannot escape the awareness that they are not alone. Hollow Lake Cabin sits in a low depression beside the water, surrounded by dense trees. The lake stretches quietly beyond the cabin, its surface often still, reflecting the dark shapes of the forest that encircle it. The isolation of the cabin gives it a quiet weight, a sense of seclusion that draws some visitors in and warns others away. Those who approach the cabin often speak of strange sounds. Doors open and close with no wind, swinging slowly or slamming shut as if moved by invisible hands. Footsteps echo across the floorboards when no one is present. And the faint creak of furniture seems synchronized with unseen movements. Each sound carries through the air, amplified by the emptiness and the close embrace of the surrounding trees. Shadows cling to corners and hallways, moving in ways that feel deliberate. Figures appear for a moment, just enough to catch the eye, their faces obscured by darkness. Sometimes they vanish when approached, leaving only a chill in the air and a sense that the space is not entirely empty. Visitors describe a sensation of being watched, a quiet pressure on their awareness that seems to follow them from room to room. Whispers rise from nowhere, voices soft yet urgent. They call names, issue warnings, and sometimes plead. The sound drifts from room to room, from the floorboards to the walls, and occasionally seems to travel across the lake itself. The effect is disorienting, as if the cabin and its surroundings are alive with memory, replaying moments that no one alive can fully recall. The history of Hollow Lake Cabin is steeped in tragedy. Over the years, accidents have claimed lives near the lake. Some drowned in sudden currents, while others fell victim to treacherous terrain or unforeseen storms. Locals say the spirits of these lost souls linger near the cabin, bound by the events that took them, unable or unwilling to leave. Their presence is subtle yet unmistakable, felt in the creak of a floorboard, the movement of shadows, and the persistent whispering carried by the wind. The history of Hollow Lake Cabin is steeped in tragedy. Visitors often report that the lake itself seems aware of their presence. Ripples appear with no wind to disturb the water. And fog rises in patterns that almost resemble figures moving across the surface. The reflection of the cabin and its surroundings can shift subtly, showing shapes that are not visible when looked at directly. The water seems to mirror more than the physical landscape, hinting at the hidden layers of memory and energy bound to this place. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere is heavy with anticipation. The air feels cold, damp, and alive, carrying the faint scent of earth, water, and decaying leaves. Each room holds its own weight, its own collection of sounds and shadows. Mirrors sometimes reflect fleeting images, glimpses of figures standing behind or beside visitors, vanishing when attention is focused directly upon them. Even furniture and objects seem to respond, shifting ever so slightly as if moved by unseen hands. The surrounding forest amplifies the haunting. Trees press close to the cabin, their branches weaving dense shadows that lengthen as the day wanes. Fog creeps along the ground at dawn and dusk, curling between trees and across the lake, softening shapes and distorting distances. Visitors can feel the quiet intensity of the forest pressing in, blending with the restless energy of the cabin itself. Time feels different at Hollow Lake Cabin. Hours pass unnoticed, and the rhythm of the day seems warped. Whispers linger, shadows repeat their movements, and footsteps echo long after they should have ended. Visitors often find that what seemed like a brief visit stretches into an experience that feels measured in both minutes and something more intangible. Some who linger near the cabin report sensations of touch. A cold brush on the arm, a pressure at the shoulder, or the feeling of being gently guided through rooms. These experiences are fleeting but impactful, leaving a lasting impression of the presence of those who remain. The cabin, the lake, and the surrounding forest work in concert to create an environment where memory, emotion, and unseen energy converge. Hollow Lake Cabin stands as a quiet sentinel over its own history. Every door that moves, every shadow that passes, every whisper that drifts through the air tells a story of lives lived and lost, of accidents and the spirits that linger. Visitors emerge from the cabin with a deep sense of the weight carried here, an awareness that this is a place where the past refuses to rest. The lake reflects more than light, it reflects memory. The trees hold more than branches, they hold presence. The cabin itself is more than wood and stone, it is a vessel for lingering spirits and the echo of events long past. Those who visit Hollow Lake Cabin are touched by this weight, carrying whispers, shadows, and reflections with them, a reminder that some places are never truly empty. Hollow Lake Cabin remains a space of quiet mystery. Its deck, rooms, and the water that laps gently against the shore form an environment that is immersive, atmospheric, and haunting. The experiences reported here linger long after visitors leave, a testament to the restless energy that binds the cabin, the lake, and the surrounding forest. It is a place where the past is always present, where the voices of the lost are never far, and where the shadows remind all who enter that some histories are never truly silent. The cabin's wooden boards creaked in the wind, the only sound in the desolate silence. The ice stretched out before us, a vast expanse of white, unbroken by any sign of life. The crunch of boots on snow was the only sound that broke the silence, growing louder with each step. The door swung open, revealing a dimly lit room, the air thick with the scent of old books and decay. Shelves lined the walls, filled with dusty tomes and ancient artifacts, each one more disturbing than the last. The book's cover was bound in what appeared to be human skin, the words etched into the cover seemed to shift and writhe like living things. The figures stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the book, their face a mask of horror and fascination. Their eyes were wide with terror, their face pale and sweaty, as they seemed to be frozen in time. The trees loomed above, their branches like skeletal fingers, reaching out to snuff out the last vestiges of light. The symbol pulsed with a malevolent energy, its meaning lost to the ages. The figures stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the symbol, their face a mask of horror and fascination. Their eyes were wide with terror, their face pale and sweaty, as they seemed to be frozen in time. The trees loomed above, their branches like skeletal fingers, reaching out to snuff out the last vestiges of light. The symbol pulsed with a malevolent energy, its meaning lost to the ages. The figures stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the symbol, their face a mask of horror and fascination. Their eyes were wide with terror, their face pale and sweaty, as they seemed to be frozen in time. The trees loomed above, their branches like skeletal fingers, reaching out to snuff out the last vestiges of light. The symbol pulsed with a malevolent energy, its meaning lost to the ages. The figures stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the symbol, their face a mask of horror and fascination. Their eyes were wide with terror, their face pale and sweaty, as they seemed to be frozen in time. The trees loomed above, their branches like skeletal fingers, reaching out to snuff out the last vestiges of light. The symbol pulsed with a malevolent energy, its meaning lost to the ages. The figures stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the symbol, their face a mask of horror and fascination. Their eyes were wide with terror, their face pale and sweaty, as they seemed to be frozen in time. The trees loomed above, their branches like skeletal fingers, reaching out to snuff out the last vestiges of light. The symbol pulsed with a malevolent energy, its meaning lost to the ages. The figures stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the symbol, their face a mask of horror and fascination. Their eyes were wide with terror, their face pale and sweaty, as they seemed to be frozen in time. The trees loomed above, their branches like skeletal fingers, reaching out to snuff out the last vestiges of light. The symbol pulsed with a malevolent energy, its meaning lost to the ages. The figure stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the symbol, their face a mask of horror and fascination. Their eyes were wide with terror, their face pale and sweaty, as they seemed to be frozen in time. The trees loomed above, their branches like skeletal fingers, reaching out to snuff out the last vestiges of light. The symbol pulsed with a malevolent energy, its meaning lost to the ages. The figure stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the symbol, their face a mask of horror and fascination. Their eyes were wide with terror, their face pale and sweaty, as they seemed to be frozen in time. The trees loomed above, their branches like skeletal fingers, reaching out to snuff out the last vestiges of light. The symbol pulsed with a malevolent energy, its meaning lost to the ages. The figure stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the symbol, their face a mask of horror and fascination. Their eyes were wide with terror, their face pale and sweaty, as they seemed to be frozen in time. The trees loomed above, their branches like skeletal fingers, reaching out to snuff out the last vestiges of light. The symbol pulsed with a malevolent energy, its meaning lost to the ages. The figure stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the symbol, their face a mask of horror and fascination. Their eyes were wide with terror, their face pale and sweaty, as they seemed to be frozen in time. The trees loomed above, their branches like skeletal fingers, reaching out to snuff out the last vestiges of light. The symbol pulsed with a malevolent energy, its meaning lost to the ages. The figure stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the symbol, their face a mask of horror and fascination. Their eyes were wide with terror, their face pale and sweaty, as they seemed to be frozen in time. The trees loomed above, their branches like skeletal fingers, reaching out to snuff out the last vestiges of light. The symbol pulsed with a malevolent energy, its meaning lost to the ages. Blackwater Cabin rests on the edge of a dark, still bay, its weathered wood blending almost seamlessly with the shadows of surrounding trees. By day, the cabin appears calm, the surface of the water smooth and mirror-like, reflecting the sky and nearby foliage. Yet even in daylight, there is an unsettling weight in the air, a subtle tension that warns visitors something is not quite right. As night falls, the atmosphere grows heavier. The surface of the bay seems to shift, and travelers report seeing figures moving just beneath the water, shapes that glide with unnatural grace. The forms are fleeting, appearing only for a moment before vanishing into the black depths. Whispers rise from the water after dark, faint and soft at first, then growing into voices that call names, sometimes familiar, sometimes unknown. The sound is hypnotic, echoing across the cabin and along the shoreline. Those who pause to listen often feel a subtle pull. A suggestion that the water is reaching for them, drawing their attention to the unseen depths. Windows of the cabin reveal more than interiors. Some visitors glimpse shadowy silhouettes moving just inside, figures that vanish when approached, leaving only a chill and a sense of having been watched. Figures that vanish when approached, leaving only a chill and a sense of having been watched. Cold drafts sweep through hallways and rooms, brushing against shoulders and arms with a light, chilling touch. Temperatures drop inexplicably. Shadows linger in corners, drift across the floors, and sometimes seem to peer out toward the bay, waiting for something or someone to arrive. Inside the cabin, temperatures drop inexplicably. Cold drafts sweep through hallways and rooms, brushing against shoulders and arms with a light, chilling touch. Doors creak open or shut without wind, and the subtle echo of footsteps follows intruders along the wooden floors. The feeling is never threatening, yet it is persistent, a constant reminder that the space is shared with unseen occupants. Locals say the spirits of those who disappeared while boating nearby remain, tethered to the water and the cabin. Their presence is subtle, manifesting in ripples that appear without wind, shadows that move beneath the surface, and whispers that linger long after the initial sound fades. Some nights, the water glows faintly under the moonlight, a spectral shimmer that hints at what lies beneath. Travelers have reported glimpsing figures standing along the shore, staring silently toward the cabin. They do not move in the ordinary sense, instead, they seem suspended between the world of the living and the realm of memory. When approached, the figures dissolve into mist or shadow, leaving the observer with the echo of presence and the sense of a story unfinished. The cabin and bay work together to create an immersive experience. Sounds are amplified, yet disjointed. The soft lapping of water against the dock sometimes resembles footsteps or the dragging of something unseen. The wind carries fragments of voices and laughter that vanish as soon as attention is focused on them. Even the moonlight seems to bend, casting reflections that do not align with reality, forming shapes along the shore and water that vanish when approached. Visitors report moments of disorientation, losing track of time within the cabin or along the water's edge. The combination of whispers, shadows, and spectral reflections creates an environment that feels alive with memory. Every sound and movement seems to carry intention, as though the spirits want to be acknowledged, or perhaps simply observed from a respectful distance. Despite its unsettling presence, Blackwater Cabin holds a strange allure. The natural beauty of the bay, the stillness of the water, and the isolation of the cabin draw travelers in, creating a tension between fascination and caution. Visitors leave with lasting impressions of shadows beneath the water, voices carried across the lake, and the faint brush of icy hands. The experience lingers, a quiet but persistent reminder that the spirits remain, watching, waiting, and bound to the cabin and the bay. The line between the living and the spectral blurs. Each visitor becomes a witness to the stories carried by the lake, the whispers of those who vanished, and the presence of shadows that never fully fade. The cabin endures, quiet and watchful, a sentinel on the dark waters, ensuring that the spirits of the bay remain part of the night, ever present and impossible to forget. Twilight Lake Cabin rests at the far end of a secluded lake. Its wooden walls bathed in the soft glow of evening. The water stretches quietly, reflecting the last light of day. And the surrounding forest holds its breath, as if waiting. The air carries the scent of damp pine. And the faint, lingering mist rising from the lake, wrapping the cabin in a shroud that seems to soften the edges of reality. Travelers often speak of lights moving across the water. They are not the flicker of lanterns or passing boats, but orbs or streaks that drift and pulse, lingering just long enough to be noticed, before vanishing. The effect is hypnotic, almost magnetic, drawing the eye to the water's surface, where it seems something unseen waits beneath the reflection of twilight. Figures sometimes appear at the windows of the cabin, dark and shadowed. They do not knock or call out, but move with an unsettling calm, walking across the deck, or standing motionless, as if observing the lake and those who have arrived. Guests report a feeling of being watched, an awareness that the cabin is not entirely empty, and that the shadows are aware of every movement. Whispers travel across the lake, carried on the evening breeze. They are soft, sometimes urgent, repeating names of visitors or offering warnings that are indistinct yet compelling. The sound of the water amplifies them, creating echoes that linger and shift, as if the lake itself is speaking. The whispers can be disorienting, making it hard to distinguish the source, and leaving those who hear them questioning whether they are truly alone. The surrounding forest adds to the atmosphere of suspense. Trees sway gently, and the interplay of light and shadow creates fleeting shapes that vanish when looked at directly. Even the ordinary sounds of wildlife seem amplified, each rustle or distant call becoming a potential sign of presence. The forest seems attentive, responsive, as if aware of every step taken by travelers moving toward or away from the cabin. Inside the cabin, the sense of time can shift. A quiet pause by the window may stretch into long moments. The sounds from outside become sharper and more vivid. Floors creak under invisible weight. Doors move slightly without reason. Small objects may appear displaced when looked at again. These subtle signs create the impression that the cabin itself is alive, a participant in the strange phenomena surrounding the lake. Travelers have reported seeing shapes on the water that do not belong to boats or natural movement. Forms glide beneath the surface or drift along the edge, sometimes accompanied by the faintest hint of movement in the trees lining the shore. The effect is fleeting yet unmistakable, leaving a sense of being in the presence of something beyond understanding. Locals tell stories of fishermen and campers who vanished from the area, leaving behind only whispers of their existence. The spirits of those lost are said to linger, drawn to the cabin and the water, bound by unresolved fates. Those who spend the night often describe a sensation of being observed, of unseen eyes tracking their movements, and of the soft presence of lives that once were. The combination of lake, forest, and cabin creates an environment where perception and reality blur. Shadows, whispers, and lights interact in ways that defy simple explanation. And the feeling of being both welcomed and warned persists. Every visitor senses that the cabin and its surroundings hold memories too deep to be forgotten. Stories that linger in the twilight air. And in the water's reflection. Stories that linger in the twilight air and in the water's reflection. And in the water's reflection. That the cabin and its surroundings hold memories too deep to be forgotten, stories that linger in the twilight air and in the water's reflection. Every visitor senses that the cabin and its surroundings hold memories too deep to be forgotten, stories that linger in the twilight air and in the water's reflection. Even after leaving, travelers carry the memory of Twilight Lake Cabin with them. The whispers, the lights on the water, and the fleeting shapes at the windows remain vivid, as though etched into the mind. The experience is not merely visual or auditory, but emotional, a lingering awareness that the cabin and lake are alive with stories, presences, and mysteries that continue to exist long after departure. Twilight Lake Cabin is a place where the natural world intersects with the supernatural. The stillness of the lake and the surrounding forest, the shifting shadows, and the subtle sounds create a profound sense of presence. Where the spirits of those lost remain, and where the boundary between what is seen and what is felt becomes permeable. Every evening, as the last light fades across the lake, the cabin and its surroundings seem to hold their breath. The whispers continue, the shadows move, and the lights glide silently along the water. Visitors may leave physically unharmed, but few depart without carrying with them the enduring sense that Twilight Lake Cabin is more than a structure, more than a simple retreat. It is a witness to the past, a keeper of secrets, and a place where the living encounter echoes of those who will never truly leave. Icebound Cabin stands on a frozen bay, its weathered timber creaking under the weight of snow and ice that cling even in the warmth of summer. Inside, icy drafts move through the rooms with no discernible source. Despite doors and windows being tightly shut, yet the cold seems to find every corner, brushing against skin with an almost sentient awareness. Visitors describe it as alive, a presence that presses gently yet insistently, filling the space with quiet tension. Each breath carries a crisp sharpness, and each step seems to echo through unseen corridors. At night, figures sometimes appear on the deck, silhouetted against the frozen waters and dim light of the sky. They stand perfectly still, watching the cabin with intent. Travelers often feel their gaze before they see the shapes, a weight on the senses that cannot be ignored. When approached, the figures vanish, leaving only the faint impression that they were never truly gone, that their observation continues even in absence. Whispers carry through the cabin and across the bay. Names are spoken softly, sometimes as warnings, sometimes as cryptic messages impossible to fully understand. They float on the icy air, drifting from room to room, slipping beneath doors and curling around furniture. Travelers report a sense that the voices respond to their movements, rising in urgency when they linger in one place or investigate a shadow. The architecture of the cabin enhances its eerie atmosphere. Low beams, narrow hallways, and small windows create a sense of confinement, while framing the frozen bay outside. Shadows stretch across walls and floors, shifting with the faintest movement of light. Even ordinary objects appear charged with memory, casting shapes that seem alive in the dim glow of lamps or moonlight. The frozen bay itself plays a role in the haunting. Ice shifts silently, reflecting light in ways that suggest motion where none exists. Travelers report hearing distant scraping or the soft cracking of ice, yet see nothing move. Sounds seem amplified across the still water, carrying whispers and footsteps as if the bay itself participates in the presence surrounding the cabin. Time within icebound cabin feels mutable. Hours can pass unnoticed, while moments stretch unnaturally long. Visitors report disorientation, a sense that the cabin exists slightly outside conventional reality. The cold, the figures, and the whispers create a liminal space where memory, perception, and the unseen intersect. Each creak, gust, and echo feels laden with meaning, pressing the imagination toward the edge of belief. The history of the cabin hints at its persistent energy. Built decades ago as a refuge for fishermen and travelers, it has seen periods of abandonment and sporadic use. Of those who vanished on the frozen bay. Of families who left and never returned. Their presence is said to linger in the walls, in the air, and in the cold that defies the seasons. Each visitor becomes part of the cabina's continuing story, a witness to the echoes of the past. Patterns emerge for those who stay long enough. Figures appear on the deck at predictable times. Whispers rise in response to exploration. Drafts intensify in certain corners. Reflections in frost-covered windows sometimes reveal images not present in reality. The cabin seems aware, interacting with its occupants in subtle but undeniable ways. Storms heighten the effect. Snow and ice howl across the bay, wind rattling beams and doors. On these nights, visitors report the cold deepening. Figures appearing closer. And whispers growing louder and more distinct. The atmosphere becomes almost tangible. A physical presence that presses against the body and mind. Immersing travelers in a haunting tableau that cannot be ignored. Even brief visits leave lasting impressions. Dreams replay figures on the deck, whispers over the bay, and drafts that brush against skin in impossible ways. The memory of icebound cabin endures, carried home by visitors in lingering chills and vivid recollections. The presence of the unseen remains, a reminder that some places are repositories for memory, for spirits, and for echoes of those lost long ago. The cabin endures, a sentinel on the frozen bay. Figures pace unseen, whispers drift through the air, and icy drafts press against every visitor. Windows reflect phantom shapes, and the frozen water mirrors shadowed trees and sky with uncanny clarity. Icebound cabin is not simply wood and stone, it is a living archive of memory and presence, a space where the boundary between past and present, living and unseen, is blurred. Those who leave carry with them the impression of cold, the memory of whispered names. The lingering sensation of unseen observers. Icebound cabin remains, quietly enduring through seasons and storms. Preserving the echoes of those who vanished and the spirits who continue to inhabit its frozen walls. Travelers who approach step into a place where the cold is alive. Where the past whispers. And where the unseen is always closer than they think. Crescent Lake Cabin rests quietly at the bend of a crescent-shaped lake. The water glimmers under the morning sun. But when the fog rolls in, the cabin seems to disappear, swallowed by mist and shadow. Its isolation creates an air of stillness, broken only by the occasional ripple of water or the call of a distant bird. Travelers who venture near often speak of sounds that defy explanation. Footsteps echo across the empty rooms, soft and measured, sometimes circling the cabin before fading into silence. Doors creak open and close on their own, and floorboards groan as if bearing the weight of invisible visitors. The sounds are not loud, but they carry with a persistence that unsettles anyone unprepared for the solitude of the lake. Shadows linger in corners and hallways, moving in ways that seem deliberate. Figures appear at the windows, sometimes climbing onto the deck silently, their presence fleeting but undeniable. They vanish the moment they are approached, leaving only the sensation that something unseen watches every movement, every breath. The cabin is alive in a way that is intangible, a place where presence is felt more than seen. Over the water, whispers drift across the surface, carried by the wind and the gentle lapping of the lake. These whispers are fragmented, phrases repeated from the past, as if the lake itself remembers the voices of those who once stayed there. The sound is soft, almost melodic, but it carries a weight that makes the air thick with anticipation. Visitors describe a sense of being observed, of time folding around them as the echoes of history swirl through the mist. The echoes of history swirl through the mist. The history of Crescent Lake Cabin is steeped in quiet tragedy and lingering memories. Locals tell of families, travelers, and wanderers who once found shelter here, some of whom never truly left. Accidents, disappearances, and untimely deaths have left their mark, binding the souls of the past to the cabin and the lake. Every floorboard, windowpane, and railing seems to hold a fragment of these lives, replaying echoes for those willing to listen. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere is heavy and immersive. The air carries a faint chill, dampened by the proximity of the lake and the forest. Objects shift subtly, chairs seem to adjust when no one is near. Mirrors reflect shapes that vanish when attention is drawn directly to them. Shadows stretch and retract with the shifting light, creating the impression that the rooms themselves are breathing. Energy from another time permeates the atmosphere. The lake plays its own part in the haunting. Waves sometimes break in patterns that seem intentional. Ripples forming concentric circles with no visible cause. Fog rises in slow, curling movements that obscure vision and distort perception, making the water appear deeper, darker, and more alive than it truly is. Reflections shift unexpectedly, showing images that are not there, fleeting glimpses of figures standing on the shore or hovering just above the surface. Visitors often report a sensation of touch, subtle but unmistakable. A cold brush against the arm, a pressure at the shoulder, or the fleeting sensation of guidance through the cabin. These moments are brief, but they leave a lasting impression, reinforcing the belief that the cabin is never empty, that the past and present intertwine here in ways that defy understanding. Time seems to behave differently at Crescent Lake Cabin. Hours may pass unnoticed, and the rhythm of day and night feels warped. Whispers persist, shadows repeat their movements. And the sound of footsteps continues long after the visitors have stopped moving. The experience can feel immersive and disorienting. As if the cabin exists partly in another dimension where memory and energy are tangible forces. The surrounding forest adds to the haunting. Trees crowd close, their branches forming tunnels of shadow that deepen as the day wanes. Fog curls between the trunks and across the lake, softening edges and stretching distance. The wind carries fragments of sound from the water and the cabin, making it difficult to discern origin, heightening the sense that the environment itself participates in the experience. Crescent Lake Cabin remains a place of quiet, persistent mystery. Its rooms, deck, and the water that laps gently against the shore form an immersive environment that lingers long after visitors depart. Every creak of a floorboard, flicker of light, and whispered phrase contributes to the feeling that the souls of the past remain, quietly observing, bound to the place that once sheltered them. The cabin, the lake, and the surrounding forest combine to create a space where the echoes of history are never silent. Travelers leave carrying fragments of whispers, shadows, and reflections, reminders that some places are never truly empty. Echoes of history linger when the world moves on, a place where the past is always close, and the unseen continues to watch. Pine Mist Cabin sits hidden among dense pines, enveloped in a constant shroud of fog that swallows its shape from view. From the shore, the cabin appears to drift within the mist, its silhouette flickering like a mirage. Even during daylight, the air feels thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine needles, carrying an almost imperceptible tension that warns visitors of unseen presence. As evening falls, the fog thickens, and voices begin to stir within it. Travelers report hearing their names carried on the damp wind, soft at first, then rising into a chorus. That seems to surround the cabin. The sound is intimate, almost familiar, yet it carries a weight that unsettles, as if the voices belong to those who once lived within the walls. The fog amplifies every sound, making distant branches crack or water drip into puddles feel close, immediate, and impossible to ignore. Figures emerge and vanish in the mist, moving silently between the trees or along the edges of the cabin. Some appear at the windows, standing motionless before fading into the gray haze. Others drift among the pines, glimpsed only briefly as shadows merging with the fog. Their movements are deliberate, slow, and purposeful, leaving an impression of a presence observing, waiting, and tethered to the cabin in ways the living cannot understand. Visitors often speak of sudden chills, icy hands brushing against shoulders or arms as if testing boundaries. The sensation is fleeting yet intense, leaving a lingering cold that seeps through clothing and skin. It is never violent, but it is persistent, a tactile reminder that the cabin is not empty, that the family who vanished here still lingers in some form. Each brush of cold carries the weight of untold stories, of lives interrupted and left unresolved. The interior of the cabin holds its own mysteries. Floorboards creak underfoot even when unoccupied, and doors swing gently in the absence of wind. The air inside is damp, heavy with the scent of pine, fog, and the faint trace of smoke, hinting at a past that refuses to fade. Shadows stretch along the walls, moving slightly as though alive, and the fog outside seems to seep through the windows, forming shapes that vanish when approached. Visitors describe moments where the boundary between the physical world and the cabina's lingering presence blurs. A chair may rock slowly, a lantern flicker without cause, and the echo of a child's laughter or the soft murmur of conversation can be heard in empty rooms. The fog outside acts like a veil, carrying sounds, shapes, and sensations from the forest into the cabin, creating an immersive experience that feels both intimate and otherworldly. The surrounding forest amplifies the feeling of isolation. Mist clings to every branch, every tree, creating corridors that appear endless. Travelers moving through the woods report fleeting glimpses of figures watching from between trunks, their forms dissolving into fog before they can be approached. Paths that seem clear one moment can vanish the next, leaving a disorienting sense of space that mirrors the cabin's enigmatic nature. Travelers report that the cabin's enigmatic nature is a perfect reflection of the surrounding forest. At night, the fog seems to pulse with life. Whispering voices rise and fall with the rhythm of the wind. Shadows stretch longer. And shapes move in ways that defy explanation. Some report hearing doors close with no wind. Steps retracing their own. And faint laughter that carries an emotional weight. The cabin becomes a theater of memory. An intersection of the past and present. Where the spirits of the vanished family replay fragments of their lives. Despite the tension, Pine Mist Cabin draws visitors in. There is an irresistible curiosity that accompanies the isolation, the flickering shadows, and the intangible presence that fills the air. Travelers leave with an impression of a place both haunting and poignant, where every whisper, every shadow, and every icy brush tells a story that cannot fully be grasped. The fog, the pines, and the lingering spirits together form an experience that is unforgettable, a testament to the cabina's enduring mystery. Of the living world. Who vanished in winter, refusing to move on? Of whispered names, fleeting figures, and the touch of cold hands. And where the mist holds secrets that will never be fully revealed. Lantern Light Cabin rests quietly at the edge of a dense forest. Its wooden walls weathered by years of wind and rain. At night, a faint glow seems to emerge from the structure, soft and steady, though no electricity or lamps exist within. The light casts long shadows across the surrounding trees and reflects in the nearby creek, creating the impression that the cabin itself is alive, breathing quietly in the darkness. Travelers often report seeing shadowy figures pacing the deck, moving with a calm, deliberate rhythm. They do not knock or speak, yet their presence is palpable. Guests describe a sensation of being observed, of unseen eyes tracking their movements. And the subtle brush of wind that seems to follow their steps. Inside the cabin, whispers drift through the rooms. They are soft, barely audible, yet persistent, sometimes calling names, sometimes offering warnings that cannot be fully understood. The sound seems to shift depending on where one stands, appearing closer or more distant as though the voices move through the walls themselves. Guests often feel a chill as the whispers brush against their ears, and the effect can be disorienting, leaving them unsure whether the sound is imagined or real. Flickering lanterns are sometimes seen hovering in the corners of rooms or along the hallways. They glow with a warm, amber light, illuminating the floorboards and furniture. Yet when approached, they vanish instantly, leaving only darkness in their place. The sudden disappearance leaves a lingering impression. A sense that something unseen is guiding the light. Revealing glimpses of the cabin's history for those who notice. The forest surrounding Lantern Light Cabin contributes to the mysterious atmosphere. Branches sway in the night breeze, casting moving shadows across the windows. The distant call of owls and the rustle of leaves become part of the symphony of sounds. The combination of natural and supernatural elements creates an immersive experience, making it difficult to distinguish between what is real and what is felt. Travelers have described a strange awareness within the cabin, a sense that the past and present coexist. Objects may appear slightly displaced, or furniture may creak as if someone unseen is walking past. The subtle movements are never violent, but they are deliberate, as though the spirits who linger here continue the routines of their former lives, never leaving the rooms they once inhabited. The faint glow, the whispers, and the shadowy figures combine to create an atmosphere that is both haunting and captivating. Every corner of the cabin seems to hold a story, every flicker of light or soft sound suggesting memories preserved in the walls. Visitors often feel a mixture of curiosity and caution, drawn to explore yet careful not to disturb the spirits who remain. The cabin's history is etched into its structure, though much remains unknown. Locals tell of families who lived and died there long ago, of lives intertwined with the land and forest surrounding the cabin. Some of the spirits are said to be protective, guiding those who enter gently, while others are more restless, their presence felt through shadows and whispers that hint at unresolved stories. Time seems to behave differently inside Lantern Light Cabin. Minutes may stretch longer than expected. And the quiet moments are dense with anticipation. The faint glow persists throughout the night. As if the cabin itself is maintaining a watchful vigil over its surroundings and any who enter. Even after leaving, travelers carry the memory of the cabin with them. The image of the shadowy figures, the whispers, and the flickering lanterns remain vivid, leaving a lingering sense of wonder and unease. It is a place where the living and the unseen intersect, where history and mystery coexist, and where every visit feels like stepping into a story that continues to unfold. Lantern Light Cabin stands as a testament to the unseen, a location where the natural and supernatural intertwine. The soft glow in the night, the gentle movements, and the voices carried on the wind create an experience that is immersive and unforgettable. Visitors leave changed, aware that the cabin and its spirits remain, quietly observing, quietly waiting, and quietly sharing fragments of a past that refuses to be forgotten. Dead Pine Cabin stands amid a forest of lifeless pines, their skeletal branches swaying in the wind with a hollow creak. The air is heavy with stillness, carrying a chill that seems to seep into the bones of anyone who approaches. The ground is littered with dry needles, forming a soft, rustling carpet underfoot, yet even the slightest step sounds amplified in the quiet that surrounds the cabin. Inside, the atmosphere is dense and silent. Footsteps echo through empty rooms, though no one else is present. Travelers report a sensation of being watched, a presence that moves just beyond the edge of perception. Shadows stretch along walls and floors, lingering longer than light would naturally allow, creating the impression of unseen figures pacing the halls. Windows frame scenes of the surrounding forest, yet sometimes visitors see movement where there should be none. Figures appear briefly, silhouettes standing silently against the dim light of the trees, then vanish when approached. Their faces are obscured, features unreadable, yet the weight of their gaze is unmistakable, that raises the hair on their arms. Those who look closely feel the eyes follow them, carrying a quiet intensity that raises the hair on their arms. Whispers drift through the air, soft at first and almost imperceptible, then gaining clarity. The tone is urgent, carrying emotion that cannot be ignored. The voice seems to come from everywhere at once, curling around corners and drifting beneath doors. Slipping into spaces that should be empty, it is a sound that presses against the mind, insisting on attention without revealing its source. The architecture of the cabin enhances the eerie atmosphere. Low ceilings and narrow hallways create a sense of confinement, while windows and doorways frame shadows in ways that suggest motion where there is none. Furniture remains undisturbed, yet travelers report feeling the impression of recent activity, as if someone unseen moved through the room moments before. Each creak of the floorboards, each gust of wind through a crack, feels deliberate. A part of a larger presence inhabiting the space. Outside, the forest itself seems alive with quiet menace. The dead pines sway and groan, their forms casting jagged shadows across the cabin walls. Wind moves in patterns that mimic the shape of human motion, brushing against the body as if seeking to warn or guide. Sounds of the forest are strangely muted, yet certain noises are amplified, creating an unnatural rhythm that unsettles the senses. Visitors often describe a sensation of time shifting within the cabin. Minutes stretch, then collapse without warning. A single step can feel like hours, and a glance into a shadowed corner may linger far longer than reality allows. This fluidity of time heightens the feeling that the cabin exists slightly apart from the normal world, a place where memory, perception, and unseen forces intermingle. The history of Dead Pine Cabin adds to its unsettling nature. Locals recount stories of a family that once lived within its walls, who vanished without a trace during a winter storm decades ago. No evidence of their departure or fate was ever found, yet the cabin retains traces of their presence. Travelers often sense the weight of their lingering spirits, the residue of lives interrupted, echoing through rooms and corridors. Patterns begin to emerge for those who linger. Figures appear in windows at certain times. Shadows align with the creaking of floorboards. Whispers repeat phrases as though guiding or warning visitors. The air grows colder in corners where the presence is strongest, carrying the sensation of invisible hands brushing against skin. Even ordinary objects seem charged with memory, casting shapes in the dim light that suggest movement and awareness. Storms intensify the cabina's presence. Rain and wind batter the exterior, rattling windows and shaking the structure. During these nights, shadows lengthen and whispers grow clearer, forming messages that are difficult to interpret but impossible to ignore. The sense of being observed becomes more pronounced, pressing against the mind, heightening the awareness of every sound, every shift of light, and every fleeting shadow. Even brief visits leave lasting impressions. Travelers describe vivid dreams replaying glimpses of figures, repeated whispers, and the sensation of invisible observers. Memories of the cabin linger, carried home in the chill of a room or the rustling of trees in an empty yard. The presence within Dead Pine Cabin persists, reminding those who have entered that some places hold more than walls and timber. They preserve memory, emotion, and the echoes of those who vanished long ago. The cabin endures as a sentinel among the dead pines. Figures continue to appear at windows, whispers continue to drift through rooms, and drafts press against every visitor. Shadows stretch unnaturally, floorboards creak without cause, and the forest seems to watch with silent intent. Dead Pine Cabin is more than a structure, it is a repository of memory and presence, a space where the boundary between the living and the unseen grows thin, where the past lingers and the spirits remain. Visitors leave carrying the impressions of icy drafts, whispered names, and the lingering sensation of unseen observers. The forest beyond remains silent but attentive, and the cabin stands amid the dead pines, waiting for the next intruder to step onto its threshold. Those who enter experience a place where stillness is alive, where absence speaks, and where the spirits of the vanished continue to inhabit the space, ever present and impossibly close. Dead Pine Cabin continues to stand as it has for decades, its presence unbroken by time. Figures watch from windows. Whispers curl through the halls. And shadows move in ways that defy reason. Travelers who approach enter a realm shaped by memory and the unseen. A place where the line between the living and the departed is blurred. And where every sound, every breath, and every flicker of light carries a story waiting to be discovered. The forest, the cabin, and the spirits together create an atmosphere that is impossible to ignore. Dead Pine Cabin endures as a haunting testament to those who vanished. A place where visitors feel the weight of history and the quiet insistence of unseen observers. Every shadow, every whisper, and every chill carries the echo of lives once lived. Preserving their presence in a place that remains as enigmatic and compelling today as the day it was abandoned. Edgewater Cabin sits alone at the far edge of a cold, expansive lake. Its wooden walls rise from a rocky shoreline, weathered by wind and water, and its isolation is unmatched. Trees crowd the edges of the clearing, casting long shadows over the cabin as the sun dips behind the distant hills. The air is crisp and heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, carrying a silence that seems almost unnatural. Visitors who approach the cabin speak of sounds that make the solitude feel alive. Voices drift across the water at night, soft and fragmented, sometimes calling names that are not theirs. The lake mirrors the sky, yet reflections shift unexpectedly, revealing shapes that vanish the instant they are noticed. Every ripple seems deliberate, as though the water itself reacts to unseen presences. Figures appear without warning. On the deck, they linger in the corners of vision. Tall and still, fading into shadows when approached. Windows capture glimpses of movement inside, shadows pacing rooms that should be empty. The air grows colder near them, and some travelers describe icy hands brushing their arms as if the lake reaches out to pull them closer. These touches are fleeting, yet unmistakable, leaving a lingering chill that follows long after the cabin has been left behind. Inside, the cabin retains an atmosphere of tense anticipation. Floorboards creak without reason, doors shift slightly on their hinges, and faint drafts move through rooms with no open windows. The smell of cold wood and lake water is constant, and light plays strangely across surfaces, sometimes brightening corners that should remain dark. Visitors often feel watched, a sensation reinforced by the occasional whisper that curls through the air, unintelligible but heavy with presence. The history of Edgewater Cabin is woven into every plank and stone. Locals tell stories of families, travelers, and wanderers who once stayed here, some of whom never truly left. Tragedies occurred quietly and suddenly, leaving behind a residue of grief and unrest. The cabin is said to hold the spirits of all who lingered by its cold waters, binding them to the place through memory and loss. As night falls, the lake becomes an even more enigmatic companion. Fog drifts across the surface, softening shapes and altering perception. Ripples form without cause, and shadows dance across the water in patterns that defy natural explanation. Sounds from the cabin and forest mingle with the movement of the lake, creating an immersive environment where it is difficult to distinguish the living from the spectral. Time moves differently at Edgewater Cabin. Hours may pass unnoticed, and the progression of day into night feels distorted. Sounds repeat, figures reappear, and whispers drift endlessly across the water. Visitors speak of losing track of themselves, of experiencing moments that feel prolonged or suspended, as if the cabin exists partially outside the flow of ordinary time. The surrounding forest adds to the sense of isolation and tension. Pine trees tower over the cabin, their trunks forming silent corridors. Fog curls among the branches, and shadows shift with every movement of the wind. The air is filled with faint, almost imperceptible noises, the snap of twigs, the rustle of leaves, the distant lapping of water. Each sound contributes to the feeling that the environment itself is alive, aware of every step and glance. Edgewater Cabin is a place where presence is palpable. Figures at the windows, shadows pacing the deck. Whispers carried on the wind. And cold touches on the skin. All reinforce the notion that the cabin is never truly empty. The lake, the forest, and the structure itself seem to remember. Replaying fragments of the past for those willing to listen. Visitors leave carrying impressions that linger long after they have departed. Whispers seem to echo in memory, shadows appear at the edges of vision. And the chill of unseen touches haunts the imagination. Edgewater Cabin is a reminder that some places are bound by history and energy. Where the spirits of the past remain close and watchful. The cabin, perched at the edge of the lake, embodies solitude and spectral presence. Its wooden walls, the surrounding forest, and the restless water all contribute to a sense of enduring mystery. Time, memory, and energy intermingle here, creating a place where the past is never silent, and the unseen continues to reach out across the cold waters. Edgewater Cabin is a testament to the power of place, isolation, and lingering presence. The lakes are serene during the day, but at night, they carry whispers, shadows, and memories that refuse to rest. Reminding visitors that the solitude of its location is never empty, and that the spirits of every soul who ever stayed by its cold waters remain, unseen but palpable, bound forever to the edge of the lake. Reminding visitors that the solitude of its location is never empty, and that the spirits of every soul who ever stayed by its cold waters remain, unseen but palpable, bound forever to the edge of the lake. Thank you, my dear friend, for exploring the haunted lakefront cabins of Minnesota with me tonight. Some visitors leave shaken. Some never return. And some feel the cold and whispers follow them long after the cabin is behind them. If you ever find yourself alone by a lake at night, remember these stories. Listen for footsteps that belong to no one alive. Watch the shadows that move without bodies. And beware the cold whispers that call your name. Would you dare spend a night in one of these haunted cabins, or would you retreat to the warmth and safety of home? Rest well, my friend, until our next haunted journey.